"I want to sleep with other men," my wife said as she asked for an open marriage. Little did she know, her betrayal would grant me her inheritance. 2 months ago, my wife Emily sat me down to have a conversation about something that was very important. It was after she had given it some thought that she shared with me her opinion that she thought our marriage needs to be more open. On the other hand, her comments hit me like a ton of bricks. Attempting to take in what she had to say, I did nothing except sit there. Before that time, I had the sincere belief that our marriage was in good shape. We had our ups and downs, just like any other couple does, but I never once had the impression that she was unhappy or unfulfilled. I had the impression that everything had been going swimmingly between the two of us. We were there for one another, we showered each other with affection, and we spent time together. Because of this, I was absolutely taken aback by her request from the beginning. It is something that I never in a million years would have thought my wife would ever ask for something of this type. The thought that she wished to involve other individuals in our connection caused my thoughts to rush faster than usual. First, to provide some context, I was 16 years old when I first met Emily, who would later become my wife. As soon as I laid eyes on her, I was able to recognize that she was one of a kind. There is a possibility that our romantic relationship is a little bit dated. The love of my life during my time in high school was not the only thing she was. Hers was the first and only love I ever had. The way I felt about her was completely unlike from anything else I had ever encountered. To this day, no one has ever come close to matching that. At the time that I made the choice to enlist in the military, I was aware that it would be challenging for both of us. The disconnection, the unpredictability, and the intervals of time that were stretched. The request was excessive for a young couple to make. However, before I left, I made a commitment to her. I assured her that I would keep my commitment to come back for her, regardless of how much time passed or where our lives took us. As soon as I was ready, I would marry her. To Emily's credit, she never fell short of her goals. She waited for me with patience, just as she had promised she would. Every single week, regardless of the circumstances, she would write me letters. Those letters were the things that kept me alive. I gained a glimpse into her life as a college student thanks to them. As I listened to her talk about her schools, her friends, her dreams, and even the less significant events that occurred throughout her day, I had the impression that I was still a part of her world. She continued to be true and devoted to me despite the fact that I was far away and coping with the challenges that come with living a military life. Regardless of the distance between us, she never forgot what we had. No matter how difficult things became for me, she was always there to provide me with a temporary escape. Whether it was the strenuous training, the never-ending days away from home, or the evenings when I felt lonely, she was always there for me. Her faith in me was unwavering, never wavered. One time, I was under the impression that as long as we were together, nothing could possibly bother us. Following my departure from the service, the first thing I did was pay Emily a short visit. After such a long period of letters and longing, it was an incredible experience to finally meet in person. Both of us had increased in age. The affection that we had for one another had not faded, despite the fact that we were no longer the same high school classmates. Instead, it had a more robust sensation. During the first few months that I was with him, I had some of the most memorable moments of my life. It made us laugh. The fact that we talked for hours on end was our way of making up for all the time that we had wasted. Despite the fact that I enjoyed spending time with her, I had only ever known the military up until that point. Because of the structure, the discipline, and the connection that I shared with my fellow soldiers, I had the impression that I truly belonged there. After a period of time, I made the decision to re-enlist. Emily assisted me, despite the fact that I was aware that it was difficult for her. Following the fact that she had already done so once, she would be required to wait for me once more. In spite of everything that happened, she never left my side, and we were able to keep our relationship strong in spite of the highs and lows that we experienced together. Together, we have triumphed over every challenge that has come our way over the years, and we have never allowed distance to keep us apart. The amount of effort that Emily put into her college career was incredibly impressive, and I was really pleased with everything that she was accomplishing. By the time she had her diploma, she was more than qualified to have a family of her own. Her goal was to be married as soon as possible so that we could begin the life that we had always envisioned for ourselves. On the other hand, I told her to wait. It wasn't because I didn't want to marry her, I definitely was interested in doing so. From the beginning, I never doubted that she was the one. To begin with, I merely desired for her to begin with something that was for herself. I persuaded her to acquire a job so that she could become financially self-sufficient and broaden her horizons beyond the confines of being my fiancé. Because I knew that being in the military would force me to be away for extended periods of time, I wanted her to make the most of her degree. This was in addition to the fact that she had put in a lot of effort to earn it. I wanted her to be an independent, self-sufficient, and meaningful person outside of the context of our relationship. Above all else, I wanted to make sure that she would not have feelings of disorientation or isolation in the absence of me. Despite the fact that Emily understood, the talk was challenging. It was not until she went out and established a name for herself that we ultimately decided to take that next step. Eventually, we tied the knot when we were both 26 years old. This was where our relationship began. The splendor of the day we got married is something I will never forget. As both of our families joined us in celebrating, there was no disputing the sense of happiness that pervaded the atmosphere. During that particular day, as I stood next to Emily and made vows that I actually meant, I had the sensation of being the luckiest guy alive. At long last, I married a woman whom I cherished. In particular, Rachel's parents were pleased for us with their happiness. Her dad, who is often pretty calm, actually pulled me aside to tell me how delighted he was to welcome me into their family, while her mother couldn't stop crying happy tears. Her dad was really proud of me joining their family. Since the beginning, Rachel's father and I have maintained a strong friendship. Due to an injury that resulted in the loss of his left hand, he was forced to leave the army earlier than he had meant to do after serving for a number of years. We are able to understand one another in ways that the majority of people are unable to do because of the experiences that we have in common. On every occasion that we get together, we talk about deployments, the challenges of being separated from loved ones, and the sacrifices that are a part of the job. Over the course of time, the relationship between our father-in-law and son-in-law has evolved into something more intricate. Despite the fact that he has matured into someone whom I actually like and look up to, I am aware that he considers me to be his son. Throughout the more than 12 years that we were married, I never once seriously considered the possibility that there were any major issues that arose between us. Of course, just like any other marriage, we have had our share of highs and lows, but I have always believed that we are strong enough to triumph over any challenge that may come our way. For all intents and purposes, it is possible that I was so enamored with love that I failed to recognize the cracks that were appearing beneath the surface. The birth of our children has been one of the most challenging challenges that we have had to face in our lives. A dream of mine had always been to become a father. I have had the ambition of establishing a family ever since I was a young child. I have always seen myself having children, teaching them important things about life, playing with them in the yard, and watching them grow up to be respectable adults. That was the thing that I desired the most. But Emily never mentioned the dream in any of her conversations. Because she did not notify me for a considerable amount of time, I was initially unaware of it. During the time that we were dating, whenever I expressed my desire to have a kid, she would merely smile and turn her head away. At no point did she ever give me any hint that she was not interested in having children. In the end, when I finally sat down with her to discuss the possibility of having a kid after we had tied the knot, I was filled with optimism and even eagerness. Even though she didn't appear to be overjoyed, she didn't turn me down either. If my wife had ever told me that she did not want children, I would have adjusted my expectations. I adore my wife, and I would have changed my expectations. Listening to her, making an attempt to understand her point of view, and accepting it would have been my course of action, even if it meant re-evaluating my own plans for the future. Nevertheless, she never communicated her feelings regarding this matter. Did not once give me any reason to believe that we were not in accord. On the contrary, I was under the impression that we had the same desires, but I didn't realize until much later that she had been repressing her natural emotions. Month after month, we maintained our efforts to have a child, but it never materialized. I first maintained my optimism, telling myself that perhaps it was just a matter of terrible timing or that we need to relax and let nature to go with its natural course of events. After it failed, I started to think that it could be due to stress being the cause. There could have been a number of factors contributing to our inability to conceive, including my deployments, the distance, or the strain of your everyday life. Even when I was at my lowest moment, I questioned whether or not this was God's way of letting us know that being parents was not something that we were meant to do. Under no circumstances did I ever give any thought to the likelihood that Emily was making concerted efforts to prevent it from occurring. I was so confident in her that the thought of her intentionally betraying me never even crossed my mind. I had complete faith in her. Instead, if I expressed my concerns, she would switch the script and turn the tables on me. For the purpose of gaslighting me and making me feel like the problem, she would accuse me of having sperm that was faulty. It was a horrible experience to hear it from her, but I was able to accept it at the time. After all, what other factors could possibly be responsible for our inability to conceive? I went to the extent of having multiple tests done because I was so determined to find a solution to what I thought was a medical issue on my end. In the aim of obtaining answers, I went to the offices of many doctors, filled out the necessary papers, and enabled them to carry out all of the necessary examinations. On the other hand, the results were the same each and every time. I had nothing wrong with me at all. Undoubtedly, I am capable of having children. In spite of the fact that I ought to have felt reassured by that, I found myself becoming even more confused. Whether I was okay, what was going on? When I suggested to Emily that she should also get tested, she would immediately disregard my offer. Because she was in such excellent health, she would claim that there was no need for any tests to be performed. It was something that I decided to let go of because I didn't want to put any pressure on her. I was under the impression that she might have been merely terrified or nervous about the chance that anything wasn't right. Throughout the entire process, she had been concealing the reality from me, and I was utterly oblivious to the fact that it was something quite different. After a period of months of being dissatisfied, she gradually admitted the truth. During our conversation, she looked me in the eye and revealed that she had been secretly taking birth control pills the entire time. Each and every month that I spent hoping, as well as each and every night that I lay awake thinking about our future with children, had been in vain. She has no interest in having children of her own. Never, ever, and not at this time. It was the most unfortunate aspect because she had been aware of that from the very beginning. When she said those words, it was like getting a punch to the stomach or something. I had been blaming myself for such a long time, thinking that I was faulty, but in truth, she had made a decision that I was absolutely unaware of. I had been pointing the finger at myself. As she watched me pass exam after test without ever intervening, she had left me to carry the load of uncertainty and unease. She had never once intervened in the situation. Instead, she subtly made certain that neither of us would ever become pregnant, all the while leading me to believe that I was the one who was the problem. The fact that the person I loved the most had concealed something so vital from me, in addition to the fact that my dream of becoming a parent had been destroyed, caused me to be in a state of utter distress. I had no idea what to do, didn't know where I was, and felt like I had been tricked. There was a portion of me that wanted to see the world in search of a companion who shared my aspiration to begin a family. On the other hand, there was a more powerful aspect of me that was unable to see me living without Emily. Because I loved her so deeply, I could not allow this to bring us to our knees, regardless of how terrible it was. Because of this, I came to the conclusion that I would never be able to fulfill my desire of being a new father. After much persuasion, I came to the conclusion that spending my golden years with her was the most important thing in the world. For as long as I can remember, I have loved her with every single beat of my heart. Not taking into account the cost. Since then, Emily's mother has been diagnosed with breast cancer, which occurred 5 years ago. Our entire family was taken aback by the news, despite the fact that the doctors had already identified it at an earlier stage. The term cancer is never something that anyone really enjoys hearing, regardless of how early it is discovered. It was a terrifying idea to consider the possibility of losing my Linda. I have come to regard her as a second mother over the course of our relationship. It was intolerable to consider the possibility that something could happen to her because she had always treated me as if I were her own son, ever since I became a member of their family. Without hesitating, I made the decision to remain at home for a period of several months in order to provide assistance with her care. At that moment, being there for her and my family was the most essential thing, so I put everything else on hold and focused on being there for them. Emily and I took turns assisting to ensure that her mother had all she required for a recovery that was as comfortable as possible while we were at her parents' place. We made sure that she never had the impression that she was by herself, in addition to assisting her with setting up doctor's appointments and preparing meals. In spite of the fact that Emily's father was a powerful individual, he still required assistance, and I was happy to provide it whenever I was able to. It was only via that interaction that my friendship with Emily's family became even more established. I had the impression that Emily and I had become closer to one another as a result of everything that had happened. Emily was able to get the house of her dreams 3 years ago. Over the course of several months, she had been keeping an eye on it, frequently browsing Zillow and looking at the photographs of the house. She never failed to express to me how much she cherished it, how she could envision the two of us residing there, and how dreamlike the situation would be. As a result of the fact that it was somewhat above our financial limitations, she persistently disregarded it as nothing more than a fantasy. Nevertheless, I was able to determine how significant it was to her by observing the way in which her face lit up whenever she started talking about it. In order to make it happen, I took a seat, reviewed our financial situation, and devised a strategy to make it happen. A loan was obtained by me in order to satisfy that goal. I was confident that she would be really happy with the property, and because of this, I wanted to present it to her regardless of the circumstances. I will never forget the way she responded when I finally broke the news to her that the house was ours at the end of the day. She was full of elation. She was so ecstatic that she couldn't stop partying, and her eyes sparkled with happiness. One of those instances in which I was quite positive that I had made the right choice for us was when I made that decision. For the sake of seeing her so content, it was well worth the effort. Following that, we made the decision to move into the house, and proceeded to make it into the home of our dreams. In this space, we have celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, as well as decorated it, gathered with our families, spent pleasant evenings on the porch, and celebrated other special occasions. Nevertheless, there are times when I still find myself wondering about what otherwise may have been. I can't help but think of what it would be like to have a little child running through these hallways, as the rooms are filled with the sound of laughter. The image of that dream is still present in the recesses of my mind. However, I have accepted the reality that it will never take place. I have come to grips with it. After everything is said and done, I love my wife. Through every challenge that life has thrown at me, Emily has been my closest friend, my constant companion, and the person who has been there for me, providing support. We have always been there for one another, whether we were going through a good or bad moment. Regardless of the difficulties we encountered, we were always able to emerge from the situation stronger as a group. To be honest, it is what I was thinking. In the event that this were the case, why did she have the urge to have an open marriage? What was the reason that she felt the need to search elsewhere when I had already given her everything that I had? I was originally taken aback by the information that I was hearing. It would not be acceptable to my brain. In light of the fact that this was the only explanation that made sense to me, I approached her and asked her if she was completely serious. What other actions could I have taken? Overnight, the woman with whom I had shared a home and loved for the majority of my life revealed to me that she desired to have sexual encounters with other men, and anticipated that I would embrace her decision. On the other hand, Emily was not joking. With a solemn expression on her face, she started to clarify her point while she was sitting there. It was brought to my attention that she believed she ought to be paid for all of the sacrifices that she had made for our marriage over the course of the years. In spite of the fact that the words hurt, she continued to tell me that she had been feeling some urges that she was finding difficult to manage while I was away from home for months at a time. In her statement, she stated that she found it challenging to be by herself for such a long period of time, and that she had the impression that she was missing out on something. She made it clear that she wanted our marriage to be open so that she could have sexual relations with other men while I was still present. A sense of disbelief engulfed me as I sat there. I don't think she even had the capacity to grasp how much I had sacrificed for the sake of our marriage. I was unable to bear the thought of being apart from her, and as a result, I gave up on the idea of having children. On multiple occasions, I had put her requirements ahead of my own, and I had altered my life in order to fulfill her desires. It seemed as if I had taken care of her mother as if she were my own. I had purchased the home of her dreams, which she had always thought she would never have, and I had been there for her through all of her challenges. In spite of this, she was the one who recognized that she had made an excessive amount of sacrifices. Emily immediately gave me her word that she was still profoundly in love with me when I asked her directly, why? Why would she want to do this? Didn't she love me? Didn't she want to be with me? Was this the end of our relationship? Emily told me that she was still madly in love with me. She insisted that she had no intention of cheating on me, which was the sole reason she was even bothering to ask me this question in the first place. She reasoned that she respected me enough to ask for an open marriage, rather than going around behind my back as if it would make me feel better. She did this because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. Her emphasis was placed on the fact that she had remained faithful to me throughout the course of the years, despite the claimed needs she experienced. She then made the point that she didn't want to waste her life by waiting months to have sex with me because we all only had one. She thought that this would be a waste of her life. While she was still young, she wanted to take advantage of the opportunities that were available to her and enjoy life. What I was hearing was so unbelievable that I couldn't believe it. It was a waste. All of the love, sacrifices and memories that we have of the years that we spent together. Do you think she saw it that way? Would she consider my absence from service, which was something I had spent my entire life to be nothing more than an inconvenience? It was as if I were having a conversation with a person I had never met before. The woman whom I had centered my entire life around, the one whom I had loved since I was 16 years old, was now attempting to convey to me that it had been challenging to remain faithful to her. That a monogamous committed marriage to me was no longer a source of happiness for her. While I sat there, I tried to come up with some answers for the sudden change that she had undergone. It is possible that the primary motivation for this was not the desire to have an open marriage. There's a possibility that she simply despised my extended absence. It is possible that she was trying to convey her feelings of isolation and her desire for me to return home more frequently. When I asked Emily, "Do you want me to leave the military? Is that what this is really about? Do you not want me to go away anymore? Because if that's what you need, I'll try to do it." Emily responded with a firm shake of her head, indicating that she did not have any objections to my work. That I was serving in the military was not a problem for her. I didn't mind even though I was gone for several months at a time. There was no connection between my absence and my line of work in any way. "I am the subject of this," she stated. She gave me the assurance that there was nothing wrong with me or our marriage, and that despite the fact that she had other men in her life, she most really desired for me to remain her spouse and to be a part of her life. Considering that we were both adults without children, she believed that we ought to be having a more enjoyable time together. Emily made a number of assurances to me, including that she would never get emotionally involved with anyone else, that it would be limited to sexual activity and nothing else, and that she would always be truthful about who she slept with, if that would make me feel more at ease with the idea of having an open marriage. Regardless of whether it was a physical or emotional assault, I did not care. Because it was a form of cheating on me, I did not find this to be at all appreciative. The act of cheating was dishonest. The fact that I had never given my assent to this was something that I disclosed to her when I first married her. With regard to this kind of partnership, I had not made a commitment. It was a vow that we would always choose one another, be honest, and be loyal to one another. Following everything that we had been through, she is now interested in altering those vows for her own individual benefit. I made an effort to explain everything to her. I went ahead and let her know that I too get cravings while I am away on deployment. While I am away for a period of several months, I am surrounded by people who most likely would not think twice about engaging in playful activities with me. Nevertheless, I do not. I would not do that. The reason for this is because I would never be able to bring myself to betray the lady that I love, regardless of how long I am gone, or how lonely I may feel. It is the essence of what it is to be committed. Simply said, that is how I understand love. It is therefore incomprehensible that she would sit there and ask me to do anything like that. I don't understand how she could claim to love me and want me to be her husband while at the same time asking for permission to have sex with other men. It seems that she had completely obliterated the foundation upon which everything that we had built was built. Not only was I angry, but I was also hurt. For many years, I had complete faith in both of us, in this marriage. I had sacrificed my time, my aspirations, and even a portion of myself in order to make sure that she was happy. And at this point, it appeared as though she did not care about any of that, because it was inconceivable that she would ask me for this if she truly loved me as much as I loved her. Instantaneously, the disagreement escalated into a passionate debate, with strong feelings on both sides. Emily did not change her mind, despite the fact that I made numerous attempts to persuade her otherwise. In the end, she gave me a directive to follow. On the other hand, I either gave in to her demands, or we divorced and went our own ways. Hearing her speak those things was like getting a punch to the stomach or something. The fact that she was willing to have relationships with other men meant that she was willing to throw away everything that we had been through together, everything that I had given up, and all of my love for this marriage. She did not even give the impression of being conflicted. At this point, it appeared as though she had already made up her mind and was only waiting for me to follow suit. On that particular evening, I could not continue to stay in that house and pretend that nothing was wrong. When I was unable to think straight, I went to a pub and drank until I was full. I felt the urge to get away, even if it was just for a few hours. After I had finally made it back to my house, I did not even bother to go inside our bedroom. As a result of the fact that I couldn't stand to look at her, let alone lie next to her, I went to the guest room and crashed. Since then I have avoided her like the plague. I avoid her like the plague. Just by looking at her face, I find myself becoming increasingly agitated. Recently, I was the recipient of the call. Once again, I was about to be sent off on deployment. Before I left, Emily insisted that I take the time to respond to her. No urge to wait was present in her. It was important to her to know whether this was the end, or whether I would agree to an open marriage agreement. I looked her in the eye and made it clear that I would never comply with her request. I refused to do so under any circumstances. In the event that she was so eager to be with other men, I suggested that she pack up her belongings and leave my apartment. During our conversation, I informed her that this was not the way I was raised and that I did not believe that this was the kind of marriage that would be suitable for me. An open relationship was something she could have if she so wished, but it would not be with me. When compared to continuing to be married to someone who does not value our commitment, divorce is the more preferred option. She was fuming with wrath. I could see the anger in her eyes as her face contorted into a gruesome expression. Since that time, she has consistently refused to meet with me over the phone whenever I have made an effort to get in touch with her. It seems as though she is acting as if I had done something dishonest. I was just curious as to whether or not my failure to comply with the demands that my wife has made of me constitutes a horrible person. I just wanted to let you know that I am really appreciative for each and every one of your responses. It has been an amazing experience to read through all of them. As a response to a few questions and comments that are frequently asked. To begin, I am considering filing for divorce from my current spouse. Before I left, I made sure to let her know that I had meant it. When I am treated disrespectfully in a marriage, I will not continue to be in that union. In the event that she so desires, she is free to date other men. Nonetheless, she will not be my wife. When she was ready to leave, I gave her the opportunity to get her items and leave. At this point, all that is required of me is to get ready for what is to come. As a second question, have I missed any hints? In hindsight, the birth control issue could have been a significant betrayal, and I ought to have seen that as a warning flag. It is possible, however, that love might sometimes produce blindness. Once more, I reassured myself that she would never betray me because we shared a past and had been through a great deal of experiences together already. It has come to my attention that I was incorrect. It's 3. What is the next step? At the moment, I am concentrating on my deployment. However, as soon as I get back, I will be having a serious conversation with a lawyer. In spite of the fact that I put a lot of work into obtaining that house, I will not permit her to continue living there while she is living a single life. It hurts a lot in the end, but I am conscious of the value that I bring to the table. Instead of a wife who sees marriage as a burden that she must escape, I deserve a wife who sincerely wants to be with me throughout our whole marriage. If I am able to, I will keep you all updated. Again, I want to express my gratitude to you for everything. A second update. I received a phone call from my in-laws recently, and they were really angry. It has come to light that John and Linda witnessed Emily engaging in flirtatious behavior with another man. It appeared as though she was kissing and holding hands with this person, as if she was not married and did not have a spouse who was now serving in the military. This woman is just a jerk all around. Not only did she disregard my objections and carry out this action behind my back, but she did so in a blatant manner in the same city where both my family and her family had made their home. She made no attempt to maintain her discretion. With the exception of herself, she appears to have completely lost interest in anything else. But John, my friend, did not find this amusing. Instantaneously, he went up to her and gave her what she deserved in front of everyone else. In addition, he did not hold back, according to what I have heard. When he yelled at her and the man she was with, he made it clear that he was disgusted by what she had done. His fury was obvious the entire time. Additionally, Linda was present. She was just as upset as everyone else. When he is in a rage, my friend John, who served in the military at one point in his life, can be a deadly adversary. The other man must have been quite terrified when this irate former soldier confronted him. I can only picture how terrified he must have been. To the best of my knowledge, the individual ran away as soon as he became aware of the person he was dealing with. John contacted me after everything had happened, and he was angry and remorseful at the same time. It was his desire to know whether or not I was aware of the reasons behind Emily's behavior. I informed him about the task that she had requested of me at this point in time. In addition to becoming even more enraged, he disclosed to me that he had never raised his daughter in such a manner, that he was ashamed of her, and that he was unable to grasp the fact that she had betrayed me in such a manner. There was a woman named Linda who was crying in the background because she was so heartbroken by Emily's conduct. To tell you the truth, I only feel numb at the moment. I no longer have the faintest hope that she will change her ways, or that perhaps this was just a phase of foolishness. That hope has completely vanished. She has already made up her mind. It is very clear that she does not care about the consequences of her actions. I believe that she may have even been seeing this man for a considerable amount of time prior to her proposal of an open marriage to me. All right, I'm done with this. Finished, and finished. I have already been in communication with a legal representative, and I intend to initiate the divorce processes as soon as I get back. There is no restriction on her ability to have fun with whoever she chooses. In spite of the fact that she is still legally obligated to me, she will not do it. Emily called me this week in a fit of wrath, demanding to know why I had been talking to her parents behind her back and using them against her. This is the third update. She raged at me, accusing me of manipulating her family, making her appear bad by playing the victim, and being the reason they were so furious with her and not supporting her. She further claimed that I was the reason they were not supporting her. As soon as she took the decision to cheat and her own parents found out about it, I comforted her that she had done so of her own accord. However, this is the point at which things begin to take an interesting turn. Due to the fact that they are so disgusted by Emily's behavior, my in-laws are willing to lend me their assistance in obtaining a divorce from her. As a gesture of repentance and an explanation for the manner in which she has dealt with me, they have even granted me a portion of her estate. This is done with the intention of ensuring that I survive this catastrophe in the best possible condition. In addition, I have come to the conclusion that I will cheerfully and without reservation accept it. No matter what happens, I won't be leaving this marriage without anything, thanks to the assistance of her parents. It was never my intention for things to come to this conclusion, but at least I will have some sense of resolution now. Caught my wife cheating with my stepbrother, who tormented me for years. I humiliated them both in front of 333 guests at our 7th anniversary. A word of warning. You are about to embark on a ride that will take you on a roller coaster. 7 incredible years have passed since Audrey and I decided to get married. In the beginning, when we were both attending college, I was her first boyfriend. I will admit that. Due to the fact that she came from a somewhat conventional upbringing, she did not have as many opportunities to date or explore relationships as many other people did. In the beginning, when we first met in college, we were friends. However, as our feelings for one another grew, we quickly fell in love with one another. It was immediately apparent to me that she was the perfect match for me since she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, both on the outside and the inside. The fact that she felt the same way as I did was a stroke of good luck. When dating for a few years, we made the decision to get married when we both graduated from college, and I had a job that was stable enough to provide for us. Audrey does not have any children, and she does not leave the house. In addition, she is an exceptionally talented artist, and she does freelance work on occasion. However, she does not want a full-time job in general, which is why I have always been the one to provide the constant revenue. And for a very long time, I was under the impression that our marriage was perfect. Neither of us had a lot of disagreements. Every Friday, we made it a point to have a date night, and we made sure that each of us had our own personal space and hobbies inside the relationship. On the other hand, as I look back, I realize that I was so preoccupied with my feelings for her, that I failed to recognize the warning signs that were visible throughout the entire process. At the beginning of this year, I went on one of my work travels, and I got back to my house earlier than I normally would have. Bringing Audrey some flowers as a surprise seemed like it would be a kind gesture, so I decided I would do it. Nevertheless, when I entered the house, I was really taken aback by what I saw. The living room was a mess of clothes, with clothes scattered all over the floor and the sofa. The sounds that came from the upper floor, on the other hand, were the ones that really took me by surprise. They were moans and clear sounds of ecstasy. It turned out to be my wife. For me, I was able to hear it. I was unable to move because I had the sensation that someone had punched me in the stomach. My heart was pounding in my chest. The entire body was numb, and my mind became completely blank. At that moment, it seemed as though my heart had suddenly shattered into a million pieces. As I cautiously made my way upstairs, I was still absorbing what I was hearing. But nothing could have adequately prepared me for what I saw and heard. When my wife was having sexual relations with a man, it wasn't just any man. It was my stepbrother who was sleeping in my bed with us at home. Unbelievable was the look in my eyes, as they stood there, engaged with each other, and completely engrossed in their own world. They hardly noticed me standing there. Shock hit me like a ton of bricks, and I was completely taken aback. I was having difficulty making my breaths. Instantaneously, I made a U-turn, went downstairs, gathered my belongings, and then quietly left the neighborhood. I was completely clueless about what to do or where to go. The fact that I was in such tremendous pain, and that my heart was broken made it impossible for me to think straight. Due to the fact that my mind was racing, all I wanted was to extricate myself from the nightmare that I had just entered. After finding myself in the local pub, I made the decision to utilize alcohol as a means of numbing my feelings of sadness. Keeping drinking till the pain decreased was the only thing that came to mind as a means of alleviating the awful anguish I was experiencing. During that particular night, I stayed at a motel, because I was having a difficult time mustering the strength to even consider going back to my house. That was a reality that I simply could not bring myself to acknowledge. Due to the fact that I had not informed Audrey that I had returned home, she called the next day to inquire after my well-being, as she had done in the past. She assumed that I was still out of town. When I asked her what she had done the night before, She responded that she had stayed at home and read a book while drinking a glass of wine. Not only did she speak without any hesitation, but she did so in such a casual manner that it appeared to have no bearing whatsoever. Her ability to lie with such ease was just awful. No trace of remorse or shame could be heard in her tone of voice. Because it appeared as though she didn't give a damn about anything, everything became much more difficult to fathom. The subsequent few days were spent as I was gone from my residence. During my time at the motel, I called in ill to work and stayed there. For the purpose of taking Audrey by surprise, I continued to act as though I was still away from the city. The ideas that were going through my head were racing, and I was not yet ready to approach her. The events that had taken place, specifically what she had done to my stepbrother, repeated themselves in my head over and over again. My stepbrother, who had been a source of trouble for me throughout my youth, was the same person. Audrey had a comprehension of that history. She possessed ample knowledge. For the sake of putting things into perspective, my mother fought cancer for a considerable amount of time before she passed away when I was just 14 years old. In order to get through that dreadful time period, I had to grow used to live without her. After a period of time, my father tied the knot with Jessica, a woman who had also experienced the loss of her lover. In the near future, Lucas, who is Jessica's kid, will become my stepbrother. From the very beginning, Lucas was a bully who made my life difficult on a consistent basis, particularly during those moments when things were really bad. Then, for some reason, he and my wife were lying in my bed at this very moment. The betrayal was made to feel much more severe when one was aware of the extensive history that existed with him. I had the impression that all of my deepest fears were coming true, and I had no control over the situation nor could I stop it. Starting from the beginning, Jessica and Lucas did not like me. They wanted my father to be by himself, and I constantly had the feeling that I was being isolated in my own home. Throughout his entire existence, Lucas had never had a father figure in his life. In addition, I suppose that Jessica was of the opinion that he ought to have spent more time with my father alone. That particular time that is reserved for fathers and sons. She would go to great lengths to ensure that I was excluded from family get-togethers, and to perpetuate the feeling that I was not a part of the family. Whenever Lucas and I got into an argument, she would always make the situation seem worse than it actually was, and find a way to make it appear as though I was the one who was causing the problems. He would create the impression that I did not care about Lucas's presence in the family, or that I was the one who was making him feel rejected. She would offer this impression. It is only natural that my father would always be there to support her, and I would be reprimanded for my inappropriate behavior. In my opinion, my father never paid much attention to my side of the story, which led to numerous arguments between us. As a result of this, my father and I would dispute very frequently. As a result of my misunderstanding, I was under the impression that he was openly supporting Jessica and Lucas. My father eventually forced me to go to therapy after we had been in dispute for several months. It took some time, but I eventually found a therapist who understood me completely. At first, I wasn't sure if it would be helpful. Besides attempting to make me healthier, he was also interested in assisting my father in better comprehending who I am. The therapist extended an invitation to my father to participate in the sessions. There is no denying that that was a defining event. During those sessions, for some reason, my father started to see things from my point of view, even though it was not an easy procedure. Once he understood how the actions of Jessica and Lucas had affected me, he became more accepting of my situation. After some time, he stopped blindly siding with them. On the other hand, Jessica was extremely outraged by this turn of events. It was no longer possible for her to exert the same level of influence over my father. She was no longer able to maintain control of the narrative, or eliminate me from the situation. It appeared as though she had depleted her strength. I am conscious of the fact that it aggravated her. Nevertheless, the fact that my father was by my side, and that I got the impression that he was paying attention and understanding what I had been through was a significant source of relief for me. For the first time in a very long time, I got the sensation that I was able to speak up within the family. After that, she and Lucas changed their strategy, and started harassing me whenever my father was not around to protect me. They did this anytime my father was absent. They would band together and make fun of me for being a motherless child, by constantly reminding me that I had lost my mother when I was a little child. Also, they would tell me that I had lost my mother. It looked as though they were making an effort to diminish the tiny bit of self-worth that I still have. They would also make fun of my father's relationship with my mother, suggesting that Jessica was a better partner, and that he never truly loved her. They would say this about my father. My father would often tell Lucas that he was a better son to him than I would ever be. Lucas would say this very frequently. He would go out of his way to satisfy my father's requests in an effort to prove that he was the best son possible, and to demonstrate his dominance before my father. Despite this, it was never a winning strategy. Even though he exerted a great deal of effort, he was not successful in obtaining the acceptance that he desired from my father. In spite of the fact that it was almost disheartening to be a witness to, he continued to struggle with his attempts. At the point that I had reached my breaking point, I took the decision to leave. In spite of the fact that it was a huge step for me, I was aware that I needed to get away from the toxic environment and begin my own life. Over the course of my life, I have been able to construct a life that is both secure and successful for myself. I am currently employed by my company in a position that is rather significant, and I am able to provide for both Audrey and myself financially. My father's pride in me is something that I am grateful for. In hindsight, it has been a journey filled with highs and lows, but I have exerted a great deal of effort in order to arrive at this point. The life of Lucas, on the other hand, has not exactly flown according to the blueprints. As far as I am aware, he was working as a bartender, and had been in a cycle of sporadic connections with his ex-partner. This is the best information I have. It seems as though he never made much progress. When I was being completely honest, I stopped thinking about him. Nevertheless, I was taken aback when I found out that he and Audrey were sleeping in the same bed. I never in a million years would have imagined that something like this could take place. The nightmare, which felt like a terrible joke, was so bad that I was unable to wake up from it. The reason for my anger toward Audrey was because of this. Despite the fact that she was aware of the suffering I had undergone at the hands of Jessica and Lucas, including the fact that they had tormented me and abused me for a number of years, she chose to betray me with Lucas. When I considered everything that I had been through at the hands of my family, the deceit seemed like a punch to the face. There was no way that I could forgive it. I was unable to ignore it or pretend that there was nothing wrong with the situation. I was aware that I needed to take action. As a result, after considerable deliberation, I came to a conclusion about the matter. I made the decision to seek the advice of a lawyer in order to inquire about the options available to me. Following our conversation, I came to the conclusion that the most appropriate course of action for me would be to initiate the divorce process. On the other hand, I was conscious of the fact that I needed to protect my resources first. It was impossible for me to let her take advantage of me any farther than she had already done. I came to the conclusion that hiring a private investigator would be the best way to gather evidence for the divorce. Though I was aware that I couldn't confront her just yet, I wanted to be prepared. I came to the conclusion that it would be best for me to feign ignorance for the time being. After I got back to my house, I pretended that nothing had changed, and that everything was just as it should have been during my absence. The private investigator had been following Audrey for several weeks, and recording everything that she did. The things that I found out were incredible, and far beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. In addition to having a sexual relationship with Lucas, Audrey was also having personal relationships with a number of other men. I was completely shattered by the evidence that the private investigator provided to me. Looking at the pictures was a challenging experience. Audrey had been having connections with both her male gym trainer and, much to her surprise, a female artist friend. In all honesty, she had been having these relationships. When I first started thinking about my wife, I never imagined that she would be living such an exciting double life, sneaking around behind my back with so many different people. The feelings of anger and betrayal overcame me. Since Audrey had been sneaking around behind my back with a large number of individuals, I felt as though I had been misled, and that I was undeserving. Additionally, I desired for her to feel the same sting and pain as I did. In spite of the fact that I was going to divorce her, I was not going to let her go away without a consequence. At the same time that I wanted to expose her for what she had done and shame her in front of everyone, I also wanted to make her feel all of the heartache that I had been carrying. Due to the fact that this week is our wedding anniversary, I saw the perfect opportunity. At the time that I reserved a site for the celebration, I made it a point to include all of her close relatives and friends, in addition to my own close friends and family. Jessica and Lucas were also invited to the event. Everything was laid out for me. Before I would tell her the truth, I would wait until after supper had been served. I was going to expose her lies, tell her the truth, and watch as her entire world came crashing down around her. However, until that time came, I had to pretend that nothing had changed, and that everything was okay, despite the fact that I had a strong desire to shout. However, Lucas stopped what he was doing in the middle of our lunch and clinked his glass, which caused everyone to stop what they were doing and gaze at him. Because of his face, I felt a brief moment of anger. It was without reasonable doubt that he intended to speak to us. During our celebration of 7 years of marriage, Audrey and I raised a glass to each other. Wow! Who would have ever thought you and Audrey would last for 7 years? When you first brought Audrey over and introduced her to us, I thought, no way someone like you could have pulled someone like her. He commented with a smile. I couldn't help but observe that his mother, Jessica, was getting a little bit too much enjoyment in the event. Lucas grinned as he continued. I mean, just look at her. She is too good for you, man. I couldn't help but see something else about his mother. She looked to be taking pleasure in each and every one of his mockings, almost to the point of taking pleasure in the discomfort. It is likely that those who were in close proximity to us were laughing because they thought Lucas was making a joke or making fun of me. Her appearance, on the other hand, was a clear indication that she was Audrey. Because she was so enraged, her face became more tense as she made a frantic signal for him to stop what he was doing and go back to his seat. The fact that he pulled a trick like this was certainly not something she anticipated. It is clear that she was just as caught aback by the news as I was. Despite this, Lucas was not yet finished. As he continued to lean into the moment and become more loud in his statements, he said, I could never digest how you ended up with Audrey when I always thought it should have been me. As he did so, he became more assertive. In order to guarantee that everyone was paying attention, he paused for effect momentarily. Next, he divulged the bombshell revelation that I had not anticipated, and I was caught off guard. For years, I've tried to pursue her. I guess Audrey finally saw that I was better than you because guess what, bro? She's been sleeping with me all this time. Every single person in the room gasped. It was as though time had stopped. I was able to pick up on the shocked mutterings that were going on throughout the room. Additionally, when I looked at Audrey, her face had completely lost all of its brightness. In all appearances, she was on the edge of losing consciousness. Although she opened her mouth, she did not produce any sound. She was completely unprepared for the situation. And there was the moment when the facade of the perfect relationship that we were trying to portray to the world began to crumble. As my father looked between Lucas and me, his expression remained expressionless. He was uncertain as to whether he had just witnessed a practical joke, or whether this was the terrible fact. After turning his back on Audrey, Lucas mockingly apologized for revealing their secret. But he did not exhibit any regret for his actions. While Audrey and I were celebrating our wedding anniversary, as if nothing had happened and we were a happy, ideal couple, he continued by telling everyone in the room how tough it had been for him to be silent. He said that it had been a struggle for him to remain silent. His tone showed that he was appreciating every moment of this perverted revelation. Lucas snarled. You guys act like you're living the dream like all of this is real, when in reality, she doesn't even love you anymore, bro. His tone said that he was enjoying every moment of this revelation. In addition to experiencing feelings of embarrassment and vulnerability, I also had a sense of clarity after the event. When all of the pain and hatred that I had been repressing over the course of the preceding few weeks suddenly came to the surface, I instantly recognized that it was time. Retaliation was warranted at this point in time, but it wasn't the end of Lucas. He went on to add that sleeping with Audrey had been one of the best decisions he had ever made in his life, and that he had finally demonstrated that he was more capable than I was capable of being. As a matter of fact, he chuckled and turned around to face her after raising his glass to toast. Audrey's face grew scarlet with anger, as she yelled at Lucas to stop claiming that, she's the best lay I've ever had. She then turned to face me and stated that Lucas was most likely lying because he was intoxicated. Her face was flushed with rage. At this point, people were engaging in hushed conversations with one another, and their gazes were darting from Lucas to Audrey to me. A nervous atmosphere pervaded the entire room. The fact that my father had been silent up until this point was followed by an angry attack on Lucas and a demand for answers. The parents of Audrey were noticeably worried and asked, "What the hell is going on?" There was anarchy. They were leaning in close to Audrey. At that moment, I came to the realization that this was my chance to finally reveal the truth and put an end to everything up to that point. I stood up and said in a loud voice without giving it any thought, "Well, just to confirm to everyone here, Lucas is in fact speaking the truth. He and Audrey have been sleeping with each other for a while now." The entire room was quiet throughout the conversation. I could see the expression on Audrey's face, which was a combination of fear and shock. It was her viewpoint that I lacked knowledge. She was under the impression that I continued to behave in an irrational manner, and appeared as though nothing was wrong. Having said that, I would no longer permit her to get away with it by any means. I continued by saying, I've known about this affair for months. And Lucas, just so you know, you are not the only person Audrey has been sleeping with. I noticed that Lucas's smile faded as his expression became more serious. I made sure that everyone heard me. He had lost all of his self-assurance. As he looked at me, he made an effort to understand what I was saying. I broke the news to everyone in the room, and his eyes shot back and forth between Audrey and myself. My spouse has dated not just Lucas but also 2 other people in addition to him. Aside from Lucas, she had other romantic partners. In a state of desperation, Audrey made an attempt at self-defense. I was yelled at by her. And she told me that I was lying. That I had no right to speak ill of her. And that I should stop making these allegations that were not supported by any evidence. After that, she continued by stating that it was quite possible that Lucas and I were working together to undermine her. In order to ensure that everyone was aware of what Audrey had been doing behind my back, I removed the images from my phone and distributed them to everyone. When Lucas looked at the photographs, it seemed as though he was on the verge of crying in front of everyone. Despite this, Audrey gave off the impression that she desired to vanish into the ground. Her face grew pale as she came to the realization that she could not escape this nightmare. And I could see the fear and shame in her eyes, while she was doing so. Despite the fact that they had been so confused and worried just a few moments earlier, her parents suddenly appeared to be completely and utterly angry at her. It was clear that they were not aware of the kind of person their daughter had become throughout the course of her life. I continued to speak in order to give everyone a clear understanding of what was truly taking place. I organized this wedding anniversary, I explained to her, just so I could expose Audrey for the lies and betrayal she's been hiding. I had already planned to give her the divorce papers tonight. But I'm glad Lucas decided to expose himself first. I thanked Lucas while allowing a hint of snarkiness to filter into my voice. Thank you, Lucas, for showing me exactly how much better I deserve than she. You've made this so much easier. I went to Audrey, who was still in astonishment and still trying to take in what had just transpired, and shared my gratitude with her. I then took out the divorce documents that I had been keeping hidden from her view. She was so surprised that her eyes expanded when I handed them to her. Here you go, Audrey, I stated coolly. Here you go. It was clear from the look in her eyes that she was taken aback when she heard the words, "You are a liar and a cheater, and I'm done with you." This was a nightmare that she thought she would eventually wake up from. Despite this, nobody was roused from their sleep by this. The task was completed. The task was completed. I finally experienced a sense of relief when I realized that I was no longer involved in the lies that she had constructed after she had done so. Now that the truth had been exposed, neither one of us could go back on our prior decisions. At this same moment, Lucas was going through a full breakdown as a result of Audrey. He let out a yell at her, wanting to know whether or not the things that I had demonstrated and stated were genuine. With tears in his eyes and trembling hands, he approached her, and yelled that she had assured him that he was the only person who could fulfill her needs. In spite of the fact that it was quite distressing to witness him disintegrate in such a manner, he deserved to be shown the truth. I was also injured by him, despite the fact that it was painful for him. As a result, Audrey eventually fled the region. Her face expressed both anger and humiliation at the same time. As she raced out of the room, she constantly informed everyone that I had made her feel guilty in front of everyone, and that I should have given her the opportunity to explain herself in private, but that there was no explanation for what she had done. Having no justification. Perhaps eliminate the betrayals and lies that have been told. Following Audrey's escape, her parents expressed their regret to me. Both parties conveyed their sorrow for the actions that their daughter had taken toward me. There was some improvement, but it was not sufficient to heal the harm. On the other hand, Lucas made my father quite angry. A little while later, he pulled me away from him, and gave me a bear hug while telling me that Lucas's actions made him sick. I could see the anger in my stepbrother's eyes, and it was enough for me to know that he was in danger. Since the celebration, everything has been in a state of complete and utter disarray. Audrey has been hiding away at the residence of a friend since she is too embarrassed to return home. Every day, she sends me a text message to express her dissatisfaction with the fact that I exposed her without any justification. She claims that I have caused her life to be badly impacted, and that she is now seen negatively by everyone. In the event that she does not make peace with me, she asserts that her parents would cut her off from the family. To tell you the truth, I am unable to provide care for her. Now, she is forced to face the consequences that her choices have brought about. It is my intention to bring Audrey to light in this manner. Just one more update. I would like to begin by making it abundantly obvious that Audrey and I are not going to continue our relationship. I have decided to put an end to that particular phase of my life. Despite what she says, or how her parents try to make me feel awful, I do not want to have any further interaction with her. I do not want to have any more contact with her. I will never be able to trust her again because of the way in which she lied to me and tricked me into believing something that was not true. I have already provided her with the information that she is required to retrieve her items and depart as quickly as possible. I'll give her a week to collect her thoughts and be ready to leave. In the event that she does not, I will be the one to transfer her possessions to the street, and she will be required to come and get them. It doesn't matter to me if it's cruel. I was fooled by her in the first place. She will now be responsible for dealing with the consequences. It is highly likely that she will feel compelled to come here and start packing soon. It is impossible for her to simply disappear without first addressing the reality of the situation. Regarding Jessica, I am aware that many people are anticipating her reaction to Lucas's revelation that he had an affair with Audrey. I am wondering about her reaction. To tell you the truth, she didn't seem to be really stunned. It is not clear to me whether she is merely adept at managing her emotions, or whether she is already aware of his extramarital affair. There is a possibility that she had some suspicion or an intuition about what was going on between them. But I am unable to say for certain. However, it is probable. This is the second update. Following the events that took place, my father and I engaged in a lengthy conversation regarding the various aspects of the situation. Lucas has completely gone too far. And my father is seething with rage at the fact that his own son could hurt me in such a manner. In light of the fact that Lucas had managed to stab me in the back in the most heinous way imaginable, he, too, felt that he had been tricked. Nevertheless, it is only natural that Jessica is making an effort to protect Lucas. When Lucas fell in love with Audrey, she maintains that nobody was genuinely to blame for the situation. She has been supporting him on a consistent basis. Despite her best efforts, she continues to try to defuse the situation as if it were a Romeo and Juliet scenario, in which emotion just gets in the way of rational judgment. On the other hand, my father will not tolerate any of it. In spite of the fact that he considered himself to be genuinely in love, he has made it abundantly clear that there was no justification for what Lucas did. As far as Lucas is concerned, I actually do not have any notion what the consequences of his actions will be. I am not sure what the outcome of this situation will be, but I am certain that the truth has at long last been exposed. People can no longer pretend that he was a completely blameless individual, who was simply caught up in a challenging situation. This is no longer a viable option. Everyone is aware of what he accomplished now that his true nature has been revealed to the public. Both the fact that my father is on my side, and the fact that the truth is no longer being suppressed bring me a sense of relief. At this very moment, my relatives and friends are providing me with assistance in locating the most qualified divorce attorneys in the region who will be representing me. It is the third update. Lucas is making an effort to portray me as the antagonist in this entire issue in some way. In light of the fact that he has been more upset and indignant about being fooled and cheated on than I have been since the party, it is extremely ironic that this is the case. At the end of the day, he is the one who had sexual relations with my wife, and he is now acting like the victim. One of the most positive aspects is that no one is taking his side. Lucas has been trying to get me to feel sorry for him by contacting me for several days, but I have been ignoring him. He is trying to make me feel sorry for him. Earlier today, he made an appearance at my doorstep, with the intention of either providing me with some form of assistance, or attempting to guilt-trip me. It was then that he started screaming at me, accusing me of betraying him. He asserted that it was my responsibility to inform him about Audrey, just before he made his important announcement on the occasion of my wedding anniversary. When he made the observation that I should have interfered and warned him of the problem before he disgraced himself, he indicated that he was taking his statement very seriously. In other words, what was it that I was supposed to do? You may say something along the lines of, "Hey, Lucas, by the way, my wife is also sleeping with other people." It doesn't work like that. I let him know that he was the one who came forward and admitted to having slept with my wife. Immediately, I informed him that he had made the decision to betray me in that manner. Moreover, he was the one who had initially gone beyond what was acceptable with me. The moment I walked in and saw them together, I immediately let him know how much it affected me to see them together. To tell you the truth, however, I couldn't help but feel a tinge of joy at the rapid pace at which his world was disintegrating. In his favor, it was advantageous. With all sincerity, he was convinced that he was Audrey's sole eligible suitor. I beg you. I was then informed by Lucas that my father had financially isolated him from the rest of the family. Now that he is on his own, it appears like he is having a difficult time. He had the audacity to approach me for assistance with some payments, which is not surprising given that he was short on cash. It was difficult to believe. After all that had happened, he was under the impression that I would be the one to save him. I merely told him to leave my house while laughing in his face during the entire conversation. In the event that he required financial assistance, I suggested that he approach Audrey or even his mother and beg for it. I have reached my limit with him. I no longer regard him to be a member of my family. I was done with Lucas's attempt to argue, but he was unsuccessful. I did not allow him to use guilt as a means of coercing me into doing anything. If he did not go, I threatened to put him in the custody of the authorities. His criminal history is something I am aware of, and the last thing he wanted was for his condition to become even more hopeless. There was no other way for me to convince him to back down. Given that he was aware that I was not bluffing, he was compelled to depart. Without a doubt, I was pleased to see him leave, and I did not experience any feelings of remorse about it. Having constructed his own bed, he is now able to lie down in it. After 5 months of helping my wife succeed, she announced, "I'm pregnant with another man. I'm directly filing a lawsuit. See you in court, bitch." Our relationship had been going strong for 3 years, and we had been married for 2 years, and everything appeared to be coming into place. Olivia, my wife, was a driven and ambitious individual who had always envisioned herself achieving great success in her professional life. I applauded that quality of hers, and I made it a point to provide her with assistance in any and every manner that I could. To put it another way, isn't that what a spouse is supposed to do? It was a roller coaster of feelings for me when Olivia revealed that she had been given an unexpected opportunity to work for a prestigious company in Europe. To begin, I was overjoyed for her. I was happy for her. She had a dream about this. On the other side, the thought of being separated for such a significant amount of time makes me feel dreadful. On the other hand, Olivia was overjoyed, and the sight of her elation helped me to put my concerns to the side. I informed her that she had to leave, and that I would be there to support her while she pursued her goals and ambitions. In the weeks and months preceding up to her departure, I established myself as her most ardent supporter. In order to free her up to concentrate on getting ready for her new position, I took on additional tasks at home. I went so far as to assist her with packing, conduct research on the most desirable neighborhoods for her to reside in, and handle all of the tedious logistics that she detested. Despite the fact that it was difficult to watch her board the plane, I tried to console myself by reminding myself that this was only a temporary obstacle. For a while, we maintained our connection. Olivia would phone me every evening to tell me about her new co-workers, the dynamics of the office, and the allure of the city. Then, we would chuckle over our inside jokes while I updated you on the latest happenings in my life back home. However, as time went on, the number of missed calls decreased. My assumption was that she was simply adjusting to her new life at the time. Afterward, her texts began to have an air of distancing, as if they were written out of necessity rather than real interest in the recipient. I would inquire about her well-being, and she would supply me with one-liners in response. She would avoid the question by stating that it was not yet an appropriate time to visit each other whenever I brought up the possibility of our going to see each other. A sense of unease began to creep into my thoughts, and I made an effort to throw it off. Distance relationships were challenging to maintain. That was common knowledge. I reassured myself that Olivia was only beginning to adjust to her new life, and that she required some time as she did so. It became increasingly difficult to ignore the signs. After a few weeks, it had been 5 months, and her communication had gradually decreased to nearly nothing. Unanswered calls were received. Letters that were left uneaten. I began to feel a sense of worry, and began to wonder if she had been suffering from a catastrophic accident. This caused her to block me, a little. Sharp knife was used to cut into my chest, and it was really painful. When I was in complete disbelief, I recall staring at my phone, and refreshing her profile. I was hoping that it was some kind of error, but it obviously wasn't. Her phone number was no longer active. It was impossible to find any sign of our connection, and her social media pages had been removed entirely. In order to check her social media, I requested that my friends and relatives do so. During this time, her account was briefly disabled. I was in a state of constant fury and anguish, as I spent 7 days attempting to make sense of what had happened. Could it be that I had made a mistake? Would she be trying to inform me that our marriage was finished by doing this? When I attempted to get in touch with her family, they told me that they didn't know very much. Her mother was evasive, and dismissed me with awkward explanations about Olivia's hectic schedule, and the distractions that Facebook and other social media platforms provided for her. My sleep was disrupted. In an effort to find hints, I would spend each night scrolling through previous images of us that were stored on my phone. There was an intolerable lack of sound. Nothing could have adequately prepared me for what I was about to learn, despite the fact that my mind was racing with the worst-case scenarios. Leaving by plane was something I had pondered doing. But I was no longer aware of where she was staying. After I had gotten in touch with the landlord of the home that I had arranged for her, he informed me that she had moved out some weeks ago. I made an effort to get in touch with her company, but I received no response. The company that she talked so much about was not the one where she worked. When I called, I did so several times. I was considering filing a complaint with the police, but her mother prevented me from doing so. Olivia, she told me, was doing well and just needed some distance. She also encouraged me to convey the same message to everyone else. I was informed that she will get in touch with me when she was ready. Although I was extremely perplexed, I waited. It had been close to 2 months since I had attempted to get in touch with her, and I had tried every available method. When I came across it, I was scrolling through our social media accounts. It seems that she had reactivated her account. A picture of her was taken at some kind of formal occasion, and there she was, beaming with happiness. On a baby bump, her hand was resting in a protective manner. Starting a new chapter with the person who is the love of my life was written in the caption. Her boss was the name of the man who stood next to her, and I dimly recognized him from the photographs of her workplace. The message hit me like a freight train. Not only had my wife, the lady whom I had loved and supported to the point of abandonment, but she had also moved on completely. She was carrying a child. When I was married, I smiled, as if I had never existed. Under the law, she was still legally married to me. I had the sensation that my chest had been ripped open, because the betrayal was so blatant and so comprehensive. It was then that my legs finally gave out, and I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the TV while tears clouded my vision. She had not simply abandoned me. She had completely removed me from the narrative of our lives, which she had rewritten. On the one hand, I was looking for answers, but on the other hand, I did not want to resort to running after her because that was what I had been doing so far. There was nothing further to say. It was impossible for me to compete with the illusion that she was living. It seemed as though my entire world was falling apart, and she was over there having fun with another man. My family and friends came together to support me and make an effort to keep me rooted in reality. When I informed my closest friend, Ryan, about what had occurred, he was visibly upset. According to him, she did not deserve my tears, and he advised me to move on with my life and concentrate on myself. When every nook and cranny of my home brought back memories of her, it was easier to say than to do. How come? In what way did she act? She should have had the decency to notify me that it was over, but she didn't. When did I become expendable? In the past, I had been nothing but encouraging. The first update is that I was in a daze for 5 days, after I found out about Olivia's betrayal through her social media post. I was overcome with fury, despair, and grief. My parents advised me to concentrate on the things that I could manage. On the other hand, when my entire world had been turned upside down, that seemed inconceivable. It was impossible for me to simply give up and allow her to get away with everything that she had done. Over the course of the subsequent days, I sought the counsel of an attorney. I reached out to a family attorney and took the time to explain the scenario in painstaking detail. I was able to identify with the initial reaction of the attorney. With Olivia having virtually abandoned our marriage and constructed a new life without any legal separation or divorce, she informed me that I had reasons to submit a case for marital fraud. She indicated that I had grounds to do so. I filed the complaint with the system. It appeared to be a baby step toward regaining some measure of control over the situation. Despite the fact that I had no idea whether or not it would amount to anything, at least it was something. My blood began to boil at the thought that Olivia might walk out of my life, destroy everything that we had created, and then spend the rest of her life living happily ever after, without any consequences. While I was working through the legalities, I began to think about how I had been taken by surprise from the beginning. As I continued to play back the final few months of our relationship, I was looking for any indications that I could have overlooked. I felt as though I had been slapped in the face for every moment that I had spent supporting her, cheering her on, and making sacrifices towards her. Despite the fact that I had been her most ardent supporter, she had repaid me with this heinous violation of trust. The legal process moved at a snail's pace, but the straightforward act of submitting the complaint seemed like a mooring. It brought to my mind that I did not have to be a passive observer, as she removed me from her life during that time. I presented the attorney with all of the documented evidence that I could locate, including our marriage certificate, evidence of assets that were owned jointly, and recordings of our correspondence before to her disappearance. My attorney gave me the assurance that she would be held accountable for her acts, particularly in the event that she attempted to do other measures that were in violation of the terms of our marriage. What other options did she have? Everything had already been completed by her. In the meantime, I immersed myself in my work in an effort to divert my attention away from the inner turmoil I was experiencing. As soon as they realized anything was wrong, my coworkers not only gave me space but also provided their support. One of my coworkers placed a cup of coffee on my desk along with a message that read, "You've got this." Although it wasn't much, it felt like a lifeline at that very time. As time went on, the hatred I felt toward Olivia started to take precedence over the melancholy I was experiencing. The more I got to know her, the more I realized that she was a self-centered and manipulative individual who was more concerned with her own aspirations and wishes than she was with the people who loved her. At all times, Olivia was entirely concerned with herself. This is the second update. Just when I was about to let go, Olivia made a surprise appearance in the most unexpected way. Since the last time I had heard from her, it had been 7 months. During the course of one evening, I was going through some bills when I heard my phone ring. Europe was the origin of the number. Olivia spoke to the person on the other end of the call. While she was speaking, her voice was trembling, and I could hear the sound of muffled cries in the background. She told me that she needed to talk to me because she was in a difficult situation and she did not know who else she could turn to for help. She was honest enough to admit that her ideal life in Europe had been reduced to a pile of ashes. Her new husband, the man she had left me for, turned out to be a con artist. She had abandoned me for him. It was with a broken voice that she went on to explain that he had been perpetrating some kind of intricate hoax and had completely wiped out her finances. He had vanished, leaving her pregnant and abandoned in a foreign place with no money, no support, and no idea what to do next. She had no financial resources, and no support system. I had my suspicions that he was her employer, but then again, what do I know? She wasn't even employed by the company that I had assumed she was working for. I had not yet uttered a single word. My heart was filled with a whirlwind of feelings as I sat there and listened to her detail her emotional saga. Karma was going to punish her in the most severe manner that was imaginable. On the other hand, I couldn't believe her defiance. She had the audacity to come crawling back to me after everything that she had done, wanting compassion and support from me because of her actions. In order to get back on her feet, she asked me if I could assist her in any way, perhaps by sending her some money. She stated that she was aware that she had made errors, but that she was in a difficult situation and had no other options available to her. My silence lasted for a brief period of time, and I let her words to linger in the air. Next, I inquired as to the reason she believed that I owed her anything. I told her that she had blocked me, deactivated her account, and removed me from her life. And then all of a sudden she appeared with a new one without any consideration for how it would impact me. At this point, she was contacting me, anticipating that I would come to her rescue and make it seem as though none of that had occurred. Olivia began to cry more intensely, stating that she did not have anybody else to turn to for support. As a result of her family's abandonment of her, she was terrified for the development of her child. My intention was to tell her to inquire with her mother, but she informed me that she had already inquired with her mother. She pleaded with me to comprehend that she had committed a devastating error, and that all she required was a second chance to put everything in order. You mean that I was her final resort, right? I made it clear to her that I was not her safe haven. Having finished making her bed, she was now required to lie down in it. I informed her that her ability to manipulate or rely on me whenever it was convenient for her was no longer a part of my identity. In the instant that she left my life without so much as a farewell, she had destroyed that bridge from the very beginning. In an attempt to argue, she stated that we had a history together, that we had loved each other in the past, and that this must have meant something. But I interrupted her during her argument. I informed her that love was not a one-way street, and that the moment she chose to ghost me and marry someone else, she had destroyed any love that I had for her. My feelings for her had been obliterated. I informed her that I would have continued to hold her in high esteem, if she had just asked me for a divorce, and let go of the relationship in a polite manner. However, she had not done so. I informed her that on this particular number, my attorney would get in touch with her regarding the divorce process. Even during the divorce, she had not been in contact with anyone. What was going through her mind? I had no idea. Even if she did not appear, the divorce would likely be granted at some point in the future. All that was required of me was to wait for a few more months. Following the conclusion of the chat, Olivia broke down in tears, and I hung up the phone. Relief, rage, and a tinge of sadness were the unusual sensations that I experienced at the same time. The following day, I called my attorney to provide her with an update on the matter. It was her recommendation that I keep a record of the call, as well as any other interactions with Olivia in the event that she attempted to cause any kind of trouble. I let her know that I had recorded 50% of the call. As soon as I realized that I had taken measures to safeguard myself, I experienced a sense of relief. This is the third update. When Tiffany called, her voice held an air of urgency, as if she were on a heroic quest to remedy a wrong. She seemed dedicated to doing what was right. She began her pleading immediately after making a brusque introduction to herself, and did not waste any time. According to her, Olivia was in a precarious situation, living in a shelter, pregnant, and mentally wrecked. She was barely making ends meet. Tiffany said Olivia had told her how supportive and caring I'd been during our marriage, and she couldn't understand why I was reluctant to step up now. Her tone became abrasive as she accused me of abandoning Olivia in her time of need, portraying me as a heartless and emotionless individual during this time. The tone of my voice was calm, but it was tinged with the irritation that was rising beneath the surface. I waited for her to finish her rant before I spoke. I asked her a simple question. Was she the one who had urged Olivia to leave me in the first place? Tiffany was taken aback and stuttering as she spoke. She made an effort to refute it by claiming that she had never backed Olivia's decisions otherwise than because she believed Olivia was acting in a manner that was beneficial to her. After she had finished speaking, I interrupted her, and warned her that showing support for someone does not mean cheering them on blindly when they are making choices that are damaging and risky. I questioned her about whether or not she was also the person who assisted Olivia in writing the ecstatic social media post that announced her new life, including the new spouse, the baby that was on the way, and the new beginning in Europe. Have she assisted Olivia in the process of composing the ideal captions to add salt to my wounds while Olivia was busy playing home with her new boyfriend? Tiffany stated that Olivia had been caught up in the bustle of her new relationship, and that everyone makes errors. Tiffany's attempt to deflect the situation was unsuccessful. The tone of her voice changed to one of defensiveness, as if she were attempting to portray herself as a bystander who was not guilty. It was my recommendation to her that if she was so concerned about Olivia's health, she ought to take responsibility for her own care and take Olivia in. During the time that Olivia was cleaning up her mess, I inquired as to whether or not she would be willing to offer her with a place to sleep, supplies of food, and mental support. With a stutter, Tiffany asserted that she did not possess the financial means or the resources necessary to take Olivia in. She expressed that she wanted she could be of greater assistance, but that her circumstances did not permit her to do so. At that same instant, I was unable to contain my anger. It was convenient for her to preach about compassion and responsibility, when she wasn't the one being asked to clean up Olivia's mess. I informed her in a straightforward manner. However, she continued to preach about these topics. In light of the fact that she was unwilling to put her money or her time where her mouth was, I claimed that her sudden care for Olivia was a fake gesture. Tiffany attempted to interject by stating that I did not have a complete understanding of the situation. I interrupted her once more. I assured her that I had no problem understanding her. Olivia had just finished making her bed, and she was now anticipating that I would lie down in it for her while she dug my grave subsequent to that. At this point, Tiffany, who had most certainly been the one who promoted her self-centered decisions, was attempting to coerce me into accepting responsibility for someone who had treated me as if I were a disposable backup plan. I informed her that I would have no choice but to employ the services of my attorney in the event that she or anyone else continued to harass me regarding this matter. My words were not a bluff. My attorney and I had already discussed the subject, and he informed us that we were fully within our rights to bring a harassment claim if the calls and messages continued. Immediately, Tiffany's tone changed considerably. She made an attempt to retract her statement, claiming that she was not trying to bother me but rather was merely concerned for Olivia. She stated that she had no intention of making me angry, and that she merely wanted to start a conversation with me. I was not going to buy it. When Olivia made the decision to ghost me, marry another guy, and flaunt her new life without so much as a shred of decency, I told her that discourse was no longer relevant. It was my intention to convey to her that I did not owe Olivia or anybody else related to her anything. In her final attempt to beg for help, Tiffany's voice faltered as she made her final appeal. Her statement was that the infant did not deserve to suffer as a result of Olivia's actions, and that if I took action, I would be able to make a significant impact on the child's life. A nerve was touched by that. But not in the way that she had intended. I expressed my feelings for the baby, but I made it clear that it was not mine. I informed her that if Olivia's new husband did not feel for her or the kid, then there was no reason for me to feel the same way. I inquired of her whether or not I had the word fool written on my forehead. By saying that it was Olivia's job to determine the kind of life she wanted to create for her child, I meant that it was not actually my obligation. While Tiffany remained silent for a brief period of time, she eventually mumbled something about how she hoped I would reconsider. Her voice was shaking now, as if she had come to the realization that she had lost any moral high ground that she had previously believed she possessed. I closed the call with a final statement. I informed her that if she contacted me again, I would follow through with my legal threats. She was told that my life did not center on cleaning up the messes of individuals who had no regard for me, and that I was not going to let Olivia's poor choices bring me down. I also told her that I was not going to let Olivia bring me down. As soon as I hung up, I had a concoction of relief and frustration. Being forced to defend myself against individuals who refused to see the bigger picture was a difficult and exhausting experience. Tiffany's arrogance was nearly hilarious. However, despite the fact that she had described me as emotionless and cold, she was not willing to do anything to assist Olivia herself. It was obvious that Tiffany, much like Olivia, was accustomed to shifting blame and expecting others to bear the consequences of their poor choices. On the other hand, I was not going to fall into their trap. For such a considerable amount of time, I had been the spouse who constantly put the needs of others ahead of my own. On the other hand, Olivia's treachery had compelled me to reconsider the kind of things I was ready to put up with in my life. It dawned on me that I had wasted an excessive amount of time attempting to cure things that were beyond repair, and that it was time for me to let go of those things. Update 4. When Olivia's mother called, I readied myself for yet another attempt at manipulation. In a tone that was oozing with disdain, she did not waste any time before leaping to Olivia's rescue. When Olivia was in need of assistance, she claimed that I was being cruel and vindictive by not providing assistance to her. She stated that a genuine man would take responsibility, regardless of what had occurred in the past. There was a brief pause during which I listened, allowing her to dig her hole deeper before I intervened. During the time that she, Olivia's own mother, was not doing anything to assist her daughter, I informed her that she had the audacity to lecture me about taking responsibility. I asked her in a direct manner why she wasn't the one who was going to step in. Wasn't it her obligation as a mother to support her child? Her response was extremely replete with justifications. She stated that she had made every effort to do so, but that she did not possess the necessary financial resources. She attempted to defend her inaction by arguing that she could not reasonably take on such a load at her age, but her voice was hardly audible as she made her argument. It was my intention to convey to her that her remarks sounded empty, just like Tiffany's. Undoubtedly, she was aware of who she was. Due to her lack of loyalty and character, I inquired as to whether or not she had actually given birth to Olivia, or had simply picked her up off the street. I speculated that the latter was more likely. I mentioned that even homeless people frequently demonstrate a higher level of commitment and concern for one another than Olivia had ever given me, or than she was exhibiting her daughter at this moment in her role as a mother. My annoyance was only increasing as a result of her outraged sputtering. I questioned how Mom had raised Olivia to become someone who thought it was acceptable to betray and abandon people left and right. I stated that it was not surprising that Olivia had made such a mess of her life because she had such a model to look up to throughout her childhood. When she attempted to assert that she had served as a mother to the best of her abilities, her tone became defensive. She said Olivia had always been stubborn and difficult, as though it relieved her of any blame. I didn't let up. I asked her whether she had also been through 4 or 5 marriages like Olivia, and if that was the reason why Olivia came to the conclusion that it was completely acceptable to approach relationships as if they were disposable commodities. First, there was a little pause in the conversation, and then she abruptly responded, stating that I had no authority to pass judgment on her or her family. After a bitter laugh, I reminded her that I wasn't passing judgment but just expressing the facts. I stated that Olivia had made it very plain what type of person she was when she ghosted me, married another guy while she was still married to me, and flaunted her new life on social media without showing even the slightest bit of decency. My message to her was that I did not wish to hear any further justifications for Olivia's behavior. Her tone was trembling as she attempted to alter her strategy in order to appeal to my compassion. She explained that Olivia was pregnant, terrified, and living alone in a foreign country, and that it would not be fair to punish her for mistakes that she now was sorry she had made. At that point, I halted her. I stated to her that Olivia was responsible for dealing with her own regrets, not mine. If she honestly felt guilty for what she had done, she could prove it by showing up in court and facing the consequences like an adult. I cautioned her not to even consider the possibility of blaming me for Olivia's mess. I reminded her that I had been nothing but supportive during my marriage to Olivia, and that I didn't deserve the treachery I had undergone. If she or anybody else in their family believed that they could use guilt to get me to take Olivia back, I told them that they were gravely inaccurate in their assumption. I advised her that if she was so determined to assist Olivia, she need to take responsibility for her own actions. I inquired as to the reason for her refusal to offer to bring Olivia back to her house, provide her with a place to stay, and assist her in getting back on her feet. I cut her off in the middle of her stuttering about not having the means to do what she needed to do. I replied, her excuses sounded an awful lot like the ones Olivia had given me. One more attempt was made by her to accuse me of being guilty, claiming that Olivia's child did not deserve to suffer as a result of her mother's faults. I told her that was something Olivia should have thought about before making the decisions she did. I refused to take care of a child who was not mine, and I told her that I would not do so. While some people like her might be okay with it, I wasn't. Once that was done, I struck the final blow. I explained to her in a straightforward manner that I do not accept trash back, regardless of how sad it may appear to be. The call came to a close with me issuing a warning that I would not be drawn into their mess anymore under any circumstances. I urged her to tell Olivia that if she was so experienced at finding new spouses, she could find another one to clean up after her if she was so adept at finding new husbands. And I informed her that Olivia may show up in court if she had anything to say to me. How can people be so shameless? I don't understand why I hadn't noticed something like this before. Indeed, what they claim is accurate. When you are with someone you love, you tend to view everything through rose-colored glasses. The fifth update is that Olivia has at long last returned. The word spread rapidly through rumors that circulated inside the family and among acquaintances, despite the fact that I had lost interest in participating in the gossip. My understanding is that Olivia's mother had finally taken action. But it was not out of a sense of maternal instinct. Rather, she was acting out of a desperate need to protect her own reputation. After seeing that I wasn't going to budge, she sent Olivia the money to return home. One may say that it was poetry. The same mother who tried to blame me for not taking Olivia back had to foot the fee herself. I did not feel any compassion. Olivia was able to destroy every bridge that she had ever traversed, and now she was standing on the flaming ashes with nowhere to go. The divorce was already finalized by the time Olivia arrived back on soil that she had previously called home. There was no protest from her. She was unable to. Not in light of all the facts that I had accumulated. Almost all of the decisions that the court made were favorable to me. Olivia owed me a considerable amount of money as part of the settlement. An amount she had no possibility of paying anytime soon. That wasn't the end of it. She had been caught up in the legal repercussions that resulted from her exploits in Europe. With the help of the investigation that was prompted by the fraud case that I had filed, the authorities were able to piece together the disaster that she and her lover had made. The interaction that she and I had over the phone was really damaging. They provided a clear picture of her fearlessness, her chutzpah, and her propensity to manipulate anyone who stood in her way. They also painted a picture of her lack of remorse. The judge displayed a lack of reserve. The entire absence of accountability on Olivia's part was brought to his attention during the sentencing process. He claimed that she did not exhibit any regret for the suffering that she had brought on to not just me, but also to other people, whom she had deceived along the line. Her legal representative utilized every possible strategy in order to secure a reduced sentence for her client. He argued that she was substantially pregnant, and that incarceration would be an excessively severe punishment. It was unsuccessful. A sentence of 2 years was handed down by the judge, who stated that Olivia's acts were planned, calculating, and motivated by her own self-interest. The fact that she was pregnant did not release her from duty. In fact, It made her decisions much more terrible than they already were. In the moments leading up to the beginning of her sentence, Olivia had given birth. According to what I was told, the infant was a female. During the time that Olivia was doing her sentence, she was placed in the care of Olivia's mother. My heart went out to the child who had been brought into the world under such a chaotic set of circumstances. I couldn't help but feel sad for them. For her sake, I wished that someone in that family would step up to the challenge and provide her with a life that was superior than the one that her mother had experienced. However, according to my understanding, Olivia's story came to an end at that point. It was as if I had completely removed my hands from her. I had moved on from the legal proceedings, the never-ending drama, and the emotional toll that it had taken on me. When I consider everything that has transpired up until this point, I am astounded by the amount of knowledge I have gained about people, about trust, and about resiliency. Olivia's treachery had almost caused me to break down. However, it also compelled me to confront the strength that I possess. In spite of the fact that I have been put through a lot, I have emerged from this experience with a more distinct understanding of who I am and what I will and will not tolerate in my life. Update number 6. I am aware that there are some people who could argue that I ought to feel some level of contentment with the way things worked out for Olivia. But the reality is that I do not. There is no plan for retribution. Closure is the focus here. Olivia's decisions led her down a route that ultimately led to her own demise, whereas I have made the decision to take a completely other path. I've begun the process of reconstructing my life by concentrating on the things and people that are actually important to me. I've been back in touch with old acquaintances. I've been looking for new chances. And I've even begun to become excited about the possibilities that the future may bring for me. I have avoided becoming involved in any romantic relationships. This is my therapy session. She had abandoned me in such a horrible manner, and I have no idea what her motivation was. Having a desire to live a better life is understandable, but she could have done a better job of it. Regarding her, I have high hopes that she would one day discover a way to reconcile herself with herself. For the sake of that tiny child who did not ask to be born into this mess, not for my own sake, but for the sake of herself. Any person who is reading this should take this as a lesson. Never allow the treachery of another person to define you. Grow as a result of it, learn from it, and then go on. Mostly due to the fact that, at the end of the day, you are worth a great deal more than the lies and betrayal of other people. This is the final update I have. Stepmom threatened to cut us off from our 2 grandkids unless we changed our will to include her 2 children, but my son discovered her emails first. I'm Catherine, 62, and I've been married to Edward, 64, for more than 35 years. We met at college and have been inseparable ever since. Our road has not always been simple, but we have weathered each storm together. Our son Jonathan, 38, recently married his second wife, Vanessa, 36. Jonathan has 2 children from his previous marriage, a 14-year-old daughter named Chloe, and a 12-year-old boy called Noah. They are great children, and we have been highly involved in their lives since birth. Vanessa has 2 children from her former marriage, Caleb, a 10-year-old boy, and Grace, an 8-year-old daughter. Laura, Jonathan's first wife, was a beautiful woman. We considered her a daughter, not only a daughter-in-law. She was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune illness soon after Noah's birth. Despite the difficulties, she stayed optimistic and was an excellent mother. Unfortunately, she died 6 years ago from consequences from her disease. It was a tragic loss for our family, particularly Jonathan and the children. The years after Laura's death were trying. Jonathan poured himself into his profession and children, scarcely leaving time for himself. We tried our best to help him, frequently staying over to help with the kids or having them at our house so Jonathan could relax. It was painful to see our kids struggle, but we were pleased of how he managed to stay strong for Chloe and Noah. About 3 years ago, Jonathan resumed dating. He was hesitant at first, feeling bad about moving on, but we pushed him. That's when he met Vanessa via a mutual friend. When he presented her to us, we hoped that he had found happiness again. Vanessa appeared pleasant enough, albeit a little reserved. She didn't make much of an effort to get to know us, but we assumed it was due to anxieties and the pressure of meeting her new partner's family. Vanessa's children, on the other hand, were quite the handful. Caleb was frequently unpleasant and disruptive at family events, while Grace had a habit of throwing tantrums when things didn't go her way. We tried not to judge, figuring they were still adjusting to their new family dynamics. However, as time passed and their behavior did not change, we were unable to ignore the glaring contrast between them and our well-behaved grandchildren. Edward and I have been lucky enough to collect a significant amount of wealth over the years. Edward had a good banking profession, while I had a modest but profitable interior design business. We've always been fiscally responsible, investing carefully and living below our means. We have always intended to leave everything to Jonathan and our grandchildren, Chloe and Noah. We never considered putting Vanessa or her children in our will because we didn't know them well and didn't feel close to them. Vanessa requested a private meeting with Edward and me last week. Jonathan was on a business trip, so we thought she may be interested in discussing arrangements for his forthcoming birthday. We asked her over for tea, hoping to bond with our daughter-in-law. However, the debate took a surprising and unpleasant turn. Vanessa began by stating that she had overheard Jonathan and I discussing our will over the phone. It's true that I called Jonathan to discuss amending our will, since we had recently purchased some new property and wanted to make sure everything was in order. I was shocked Vanessa was listening in on the chat, but I said nothing. She then told us that Jonathan was unhappy with the current arrangement and wanted us to include Vanessa's children in the inheritance. According to her, Jonathan believed it was unjust to exclude them but was worried of appearing ungrateful if he brought it up himself. This struck me as weird, given that Jonathan has always been upfront and honest with us about everything. What stunned us even more was Vanessa's threat to limit our access to Chloe and Noah if we did not comply with her requests. She said it was all Jonathan's idea, and he wholeheartedly supported her viewpoint. The notion that our son would use his children as negotiating chips was entirely out of character, and plain ridiculous. Edward and I were stunned to silence. We have always had a tight relationship with Jonathan, and this did not seem like him at all. He's always been straightforward in his interactions with us, never hesitant to express his thoughts or worries. The idea of him employing Vanessa as a courier for something so significant seemed extremely implausible. Furthermore, the threat of keeping our grandchildren away from us was profoundly upsetting. Chloe and Noah have been an important part of our lives since their birth. We've been there for every milestone, school play, and sporting event. The thought of being cut off from them was painful. We didn't want to accuse Vanessa of lying openly, so we politely said we'd think about it and get back to her. As soon as she left, we called Jonathan to confirm her accusations. He was in the middle of a conference but stepped out to accept our call, hearing the desperation in our voices. When we told Jonathan about the conversation, he was astonished and outraged. He told us that he had never mentioned anything of the such and was shocked that Vanessa would go behind his back like this. He had no idea whence she got the impression that he was dissatisfied with our decision or that he wanted her children included. Jonathan immediately requested that we keep Chloe and Noah with us until he returned from his trip and could resolve things with Vanessa. We gladly accepted, and the kids have stayed with us ever since. They were initially pleased about the surprise sleepover at Grandma and Grandpa's house, but now they're wondering why they haven't left yet. It's been a week, and the problem has only worsened. Jonathan has tried to reason with Vanessa, but she refuses to give in. She's given him an ultimatum. Convince us to change our minds, or choose between her and us. Jonathan is saddened, caught between his feelings for Vanessa and his commitment to us and his children. Edward and I both feel bad about the situation. We never meant to cause family conflict with our inheritance plans. We've always viewed our wealth as a means of securing the future of our sons and grandchildren, rather than a source of contention. At the same time, we are hurt and angered that Vanessa would try to manipulate us and jeopardize our relationship with our son and grandchildren. We are at a loss on what to do. Should we hold firm or give in to Vanessa's requests for the sake of family harmony? Is there a compromise we aren't seeing? The notion of losing our relationship with Jonathan and our grandkids is devastating, but being pressured into rewriting our will is equally unsettling. I'm hoping to get some outside perspective on this issue. Have we unintentionally been unkind to Vanessa and her children? Should we have made a bigger effort to involve them in our family? Or are we justified in feeling cheated and manipulated? Any suggestions on how to get through this difficult position would be greatly appreciated. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and I'd want to thank everyone for their kind words and advice. It's been reassuring to hear that many of you believe we're not in the wrong here. Unfortunately, things have only gotten worse, and I felt compelled to inform you all of the situation. Jonathan has been staying with us, along with Chloe and Noah. He took an extended leave of absence from work to deal with his family crisis, which I understand was not an easy decision for him. Jonathan has always been dedicated to his job, often working long hours to support his family. Seeing him put his career on wait like this emphasizes how bad the situation has become. He's been trying to work things out with Vanessa, but she won't budge from her demands. She continues to insist that we include her children in our will, or she will ensure that we never see Chloe and Noah again. It's evident now that this was never about what Jonathan desired, but rather Vanessa's notion. Jonathan is clearly feeling the effects of stress. He has lost weight, is having difficulties sleeping, and appears to be always on edge. It breaks our hearts to see him this way. Edward and I have been doing our best to assist him by cooking his favorite dishes and attempting to create a peaceful environment at home. However, it's evident that the situation is wearing him down. Chloe and Noah are also picking up on the tension, despite our best efforts to shelter them from the dispute. Chloe, the more sensitive of the two, has been silent and reclusive recently. Noah, on the other hand, has started acting out in school, which has never happened before. We had to attend a parent-teacher meeting to discuss his behavior, which exacerbated Jonathan's stress. Vanessa has intensified her tactics. She's been constantly calling and texting Jonathan, alternating between guilt-tripping him and making new threats. She's even been spreading stories among their mutual friends that we're attempting to dissolve their marriage because we never accepted her or her children. This could not be further from the truth, but it is causing Jonathan a great deal of distress. He has always cherished his connections, and the prospect of losing them over this is really troubling him. What's more disturbing is that Vanessa has begun to include her children in this issue. According to Jonathan, she has been telling Caleb and Grace that we do not love them and do not want them in our family. It's a nasty thing to do to young children, and we're concerned about the emotional manipulation she's capable of. Edward and I are upset with Vanessa's actions, but we are trying to remain calm for Jonathan's sake. We've suggested that he consult with a lawyer to better understand his options, particularly about custody of Chloe and Noah. Given Vanessa's previous threats, we're concerned that she'll use them as puppets in this power play. Jonathan is beginning to realize that his marriage may not be salvageable. He admitted to us that he had previously ignored most of Vanessa's manipulative conduct, either making excuses for her or giving in to keep the peace. This event has made him realize her actual nature. He told a story from early in their relationship that now appears like a red sign. Vanessa reportedly pressed him into purchasing an expensive car that they couldn't afford, arguing that it was vital to maintain appearances in their area. Jonathan gave in to avoid a fight, although it had strained their finances for months. Looking back, he recognizes it as the start of a pattern of manipulation that he had overlooked, due to his love for her. We're doing our best to help Jonathan and the kids get through this terrible period. We've made it obvious that our home is always open to them, regardless of what happens. We've set up Jonathan's guest room and created an area in the study for the kids to complete homework. It's a tight fit, but we're making it work. We're also looking into family counseling options to help Chloe and Noah deal with the stress of another possible family breakdown. They're still grieving the loss of their mother, and the prospect of them going through another huge upheaval hurts our hearts. We haven't changed anything about our will and have no plans to do so. Vanessa's actions have further strengthened our resolve to maintain our assets inside our immediate family. We're even considering establishing a trust for Chloe and Noah to protect their future security, regardless of what happens between Jonathan and Vanessa. Edward and I have had lengthy discussions about how we came to this point. We can't help but think what we could have done differently. Should we have been more accommodating of Vanessa and her children? Did we unintentionally make them feel like outsiders? But then we remember how many times we asked them to family dinners, how many birthdays we celebrated together, and how hard we worked to include them in our lives. It's difficult not to feel that no matter what we did, it wouldn't have been enough for Vanessa. This whole circumstance has caused us to focus on our own marriage and the principles we've attempted to inculcate in our children. We have always valued honesty, integrity, and putting family first. Seeing Vanessa's acts has further increased our desire to uphold these beliefs. I'll keep you all updated as the issue progresses. Thank you again for your help and advice. It means more than you realize at this tough time. Update 2. It has been another week, and things have finally gotten to a head. Jonathan has chosen to file a divorce from Vanessa. He made this decision after learning that Vanessa had planned this deception for months, even before their wedding. It all began when Jonathan decided to review some old files on their shared home computer. He was searching for some tax paperwork when he came across a folder containing Vanessa's emails. Normally, he would have respected her privacy, but the subject line drew his attention: plan to safeguard the inheritance. Jonathan's world completely changed when he read through the emails. Vanessa had been prying through his personal records and discovered details regarding our family's holdings. She saw an opportunity to provide a stable financial future for her children and began planning how to incorporate them in our will. The emails went back to before their wedding. Vanessa had asked friends for guidance on how to exploit the situation. She had stated her strategy of first establishing herself as a loving wife and stepmother, then gently introducing the concept of include her children in our will. If it didn't work, she had other options, such as emotional manipulation and threats. Vanessa made no attempt to reject the evidence presented to her by Jonathan. Instead, she was upset that he had violated her privacy by reading her correspondence. She then issued him an ultimatum: either he persuades us to alter our minds, or she would make the divorce as ugly and painful as possible. That was the final straw for Jonathan. He packed up his and the kids' essential stuff and relocated them all to our home permanently. He's already spoken with a lawyer and begun the divorce process. We're all still stunned at how rapidly everything has unraveled. Chloe and Noah are understandably upset and puzzled. This is the second time they've experienced serious family turmoil, and it's taking a toll. Chloe has been increasingly introverted, spending hours alone in her room. Noah, on the other hand, has been having nightmares, and has begun to exhibit symptoms of separation anxiety, not wanting Jonathan to leave his sight. We are doing our best to give them with a secure and loving atmosphere, but we understand that it will take time for them to adjust to yet another huge shift in their lives. We've established a pattern to offer them a feeling of normalcy, including family dinners every night, schoolwork assistance, and weekend trips to the park or the cinema. Vanessa has alternated between sending angry messages and appealing for Jonathan to return. She has threatened to battle for custody of Chloe and Noah, even though she has no legal right to them. Jonathan's lawyer told us that her threats were false, but they are still creating a lot of stress. Edward and I are entirely behind Jonathan during this process. We're assisting with the children, offering emotional support, and paying his legal bills. We've made it obvious to him that he and the children can stay with us for as long as they need. Our house is currently full, but we see this as a chance to spend more quality time with our family. The entire process has brought our family closer together. We're all rallying around Jonathan and the kids, determined to face this challenge together. It won't be easy, but we're convinced that we're doing the right thing by standing firm against Vanessa's deceptive techniques. Jonathan has begun to share out more about his connection with Vanessa. He said that there were early indications of her dominating behavior, but he discounted them as her being passionate or particular. He regrets not recognizing these red signs for what they were, but we have convinced him that hindsight is 20/20 and he should not blame himself. We've also had some unpleasant discussions regarding Laura, Jonathan's late first wife. Chloe and Noah have begun asking more questions about their mother, possibly seeking consolation in recollections of happier times. It's heartbreaking, but we've been sharing tales and going through old photo albums together. We want the kids to understand that it is okay to talk about Laura and miss her. I'll provide another update when there are substantial changes in the divorce proceedings. Thank you for your ongoing support and advice. It has been a source of strength for our family throughout this difficult period. Update 3. It's been a month since my last post, so I wanted to discuss the most recent changes in our family situation. The divorce proceedings between Jonathan and Vanessa are well underway, and it has been a difficult time for everyone involved. Vanessa, true to her word, is making the divorce as tough as possible. She is disputing everything from asset distribution to Chloe and Noah's parenting arrangement. Despite the fact that she has no legal claim to the children, she claims to be a mother figure to them and thus deserves visitation rights. It's a tough situation, but Jonathan remains steadfast in his determination to safeguard his children. Fortunately, Jonathan's attorney is skilled and has handled the case brilliantly. They have gathered extensive proof of Vanessa's deceptive actions, including emails in which she detailed her ambitions to have her children included in our will. This has considerably helped Jonathan's case. Chloe and Noah have struggled with the circumstances, but they have demonstrated tremendous perseverance. We've enrolled them in counseling to assist them deal with their emotions and the changes in their lives. It appears to be helping, as they are gradually opening up more about their emotions. Chloe has started keeping a notebook, which her therapist describes as a beneficial way for her to express herself. Noah joined a juvenile sports team, which has helped him channel his energy and emotions. Jonathan is doing well now that he has taken definite action. The hardship of the divorce proceedings continues to take its toll, but he is no longer divided between his allegiance to us and his misdirected love for Vanessa. He is focused on safeguarding his children and repairing his life. We've caught hints of the old Jonathan returning. He even told a joke the other day, which we hadn't heard in months. Edward and I have done everything we can to help our family through this crisis. We've been caring for the kids while Jonathan attends meetings with his lawyer or court appearances. We've also been assisting Jonathan with looking for a new place to live, as he believes it is critical to establish a new home for himself and his children after the divorce is finalized. One benefit of this scenario is that it has brought our family closer together. Despite the chaos, we're spending more time with Jonathan and our grandchildren, starting new traditions, and making great memories. We began hosting weekly game nights, which have become a favorite among all of us. It's lovely to watch Chloe and Noah laughing and acting like kids again during these times. We've also taken precautions to secure our assets and ensure Chloe and Noah's future safety. Our lawyer has assisted us in establishing a trust for the children, which will protect them even if Vanessa attempts to fight our will in the future. It gives us peace of mind knowing that whatever happens, our grandchildren's futures are secure. Vanessa's children, Caleb and Grace, have been caught in the center of the chaos. We grieve for them because they are innocent in all of this. Jonathan has voiced concern for their well-being, having witnessed firsthand how tough it is for children to go through divorce. He's considering contacting Vanessa's ex-husband to assure the children's well-being during this difficult time. As tough as this experience has been, we remain cautiously optimistic about the future. We know there will be more problems ahead, especially as the divorce proceedings progress, but we will face them together as a family. Jonathan has resumed discussions about his future intentions, including a career shift he has always desired and the potential of dating again someday, albeit this is still a long way off. Chloe and Noah are gradually adjusting to their new normal. They've spent more time with their pals, which has been beneficial for them. Chloe is even talking about joining the school drama club next year, which she was previously too bashful to do. Noah's grades, which had dipped during the first upheaval, are now improving again. For Edward and myself, this event has strengthened our bond. We have been each other's rock during this journey, and I am more grateful than ever for his constant presence and steadfast support. My sister pretended to have diabetes for attention, then tried to take away my insulin and blackmail me during a family holiday. What is the worst thing your sister has done to you? My sister feigned to have diabetes because she was jealous of the attention I received from our parents. Kane was 5 years older than me and took my type 1 diabetes as a personal affront. She'd hide my glucose meter before meals, remove my low-sugar juice boxes, and tell our parents I was using my condition. When I was 10, she tossed away my insulin before a family trip, which landed me in the ICU. She told everyone at school that I was faking symptoms to get special treatment. My parents encouraged me to be patient with her, as she was only jealous of the medical attention. They had no idea how terrible her jealousy could become. When Kane was 18, she mentioned at dinner that she had been feeling dizzy and wobbly in between meals. She took out one of my glucose meters and looked through its history, stating that some of the strange blood sugar readings were hers from when she borrowed it. Our mother quickly scheduled an appointment with an endocrinologist, while Kane began informing all of her acquaintances that she was likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. The blood tests revealed ideal levels, but Kane argued they had overlooked her reactive hypoglycemia. Within a week, she was requesting the same eating plan and accommodations as I was, timing her fictitious symptoms to coincide with my actual insulin schedule. Kane's weekly lows became increasingly extreme. Never mind that in order to reach dangerously low blood sugar levels, you must inject insulin, which Kane was not doing. There's no logic here. She'd collapse in stores, shake uncontrollably, and demand juice as customers worried. She studied my actual symptoms and refined them. My hands trembled. I was confused due to low blood sugar, and my speech slurred when my glucose dropped too quickly. She'd timing her phony episodes for maximum attention, even feigning a major crash at my birthday party, convulsing on the floor until someone handed her cake. The paramedics that arrived found normal blood sugar levels, but she claimed the meter was broken. Our parents paid thousands of dollars on specialists who found nothing wrong. Kane joined diabetes support forums, promoted disinformation to true diabetics, and then concluded that her low blood sugars without injecting insulin were due to close exposure to my insulin. She demanded separate refrigerators. She'd wake our parents up at 3 a.m., citing dangerous lows, forcing them to prepare her food while I dealt with my actual nightly blood sugar issues alone, because I'm not a newborn. The truth ultimately came out on Thanksgiving. Kane was in her customary dramatic low when our cousin, who was visiting from out of state, recounted seeing her consume a large candy stash in her room an hour before. Kane froze mid-shake. Our aunt, who was a nurse, took Kane's diabetes meter and tested her right away. Her blood sugar was 95, which is absolutely acceptable. Everyone stared at her, and the shaking stopped immediately. She attempted to claim that the candy was a therapy for an earlier low, but our aunt tested her again 10 minutes later. Still 95. No diabetic's blood sugar remains so stable after consuming candy. Our parents looked through her room that night and discovered her diary, in which she revealed everything. She'd been pretending for more than a year, researching every facet of diabetes to make her portrayal credible. They told her she had 30 days to find another place to live. She cried that they had chosen their damaged child above their healthy one, but for once, they did not succumb to her trickery. But Kane was not done. The next morning, I awoke to discover my insulin pump beeping empty, which was impossible given that I had just changed it the night before. All of my backup insulin pens were gone from the fridge. My emergency glucagon was missing. Even my hidden supply in my bedroom had vanished. Kane stood in the kitchen, holding my full supply of life-saving medication above the sink. If I can't have diabetes, she continued calmly, then neither can you. She'd already flushed half of it, removing thousands of dollars in insulin in seconds. She held the rest over the garbage disposal. I had about 6 hours before my blood sugar got dangerously high. The drugstore was closed throughout the holiday weekend and would not reopen for 3 days. The nearest hospital was 2 hours away. My parents had gone Black Friday shopping and were not answering their phones. Without insulin, I'd be in diabetic ketoacidosis within hours, with my blood becoming acidic as my body began to eat itself. Here's what's going to happen, Kane explained, hovering her finger over the disposal switch. You're going to tell Mom and Dad that you've been instructing me to pretend the entire time. That you taught me how because you needed someone to share the attention with. You'll acknowledge you helped me fake all those episodes, or I trash the rest of this insulin, and you get to experience what a true diabetic emergency feels like. My blood sugar was already increasing. I could feel the first symptoms: thirst, the need to pee, and a mild nausea that would soon turn into violent vomiting. Without insulin, I could go into a coma before my parents arrived home. I'd die in this kitchen with Kane watching. She grinned when she noticed me performing the arithmetic in my brain, calculating how long I had. Choose quickly, she whispered, pointing the vials toward the sink. Your blood sugar is already rising. How high can it go before your organs shut down? I looked at the vials in her hand, my mind racing with possibilities. The disposal buzzed beneath them, preparing to destroy my only hope of existence. My throat was already becoming dry, indicating that my blood sugar was rising above 200. Kane, please, I asked. But she shook her head. Wrong answer. She placed one vial in the disposal and turned the switch. The grinding sounds prompted me to lunge forward, but she held out the leftover insulin like a weapon. That's one down. You've got maybe 4 hours left instead of 6. Want to try again? My hands began to shake, not from low blood sugar, but from adrenaline and rising glucose. I moved slowly away, trying to think. The landline was located in the living room, my cell phone was charging upstairs. Even if I could reach either one, who would I contact? My parents were not responding. The pharmacy was closed. An ambulance would take at least 30 minutes to arrive, and Kane would have destroyed everything before then. I can see you calculating, Kane remarked, blocking the kitchen doorway. There's no way out of this. Just tell them what I want you to say, and I'll give you back your insulin. It's a simple trade. I looked out the kitchen window. It was little, but maybe I could go through. Kane must have noticed my eyes move because she grabbed a kitchen knife from the block. Don't even think about it. I'm not going to stab you or anything dramatic, but I will use this to puncture every single vial if you try to leave this room. The nausea was intensifying. My body had already begun to break down fat for energy, releasing ketones that would eventually poison my bloodstream. I could detect the metallic tang in my mouth. You know what the funny part is? Kane asked, placing the knife in easy reach. I actually learned so much about diabetes from watching you. I know exactly what's happening to your body right now. Your cells are starving because they can't use the glucose in your blood without insulin. Your liver is dumping more sugar, trying to give you energy, but it's just making things worse. She was correct. My blood sugar was probably close to 300 by now. The thirst was becoming terrible. I wanted water, but I couldn't move without jeopardizing the remainder of my insulin. In about an hour, you'll start vomiting, she replied casually. Then comes the confusion, the weakness. Your breathing will get rapid and shallow as your body tries to compensate for the acid building up. I've seen you in DKA before. Remember when I threw away your insulin before the trip? The remembrance enraged me enough to get through the increasing head fog. That almost killed me, but didn't. Mom and Dad hurried me to the hospital, held my hand, and remained by my bedside for days. Where was Kane? I was sent to stay with Aunt Margaret, as if she were the problem. She grabbed the vials more tightly. This time they'll have to choose, their precious sick child or their healthy one who just wanted to be seen. I put my palms against the counter, attempting to steady myself. The room began to seem too warm. My skin was feeling dry and flushed, which is a sign of high blood sugar. What happens when I'm in a coma? I inquired. When they find me unconscious on this floor, you think they'll believe I coached you after you've literally murdered me. You're being dramatic. You won't die. You'll just get sick enough that when I find you and save you with this insulin, you'll be grateful enough to say whatever I want. She cracked a joke. I've thought this through. I'll be the hero who found her poor diabetic sibling in crisis and saved the day. Finally, I'll be the one taking care of you instead of the other way around. My vision was beginning to blur slightly. Not enough to be harmful, but enough to realize I was running out of time. I needed those vials, but Kane had already positioned herself perfectly. The disposal was immediately behind her, the knife was within reach, and she was watching everything I did. "You want some water?" she inquired mockingly. "Your mouth must be so dry by now." "That's what, 350? Nuda. How high does your meter even read?" I didn't respond. I was trying to recall if there was any other insulin in the house. I occasionally left old pens in jacket pockets, but Kane had been meticulous. She must have looked everywhere while I slept. "You know what I hated the most?" Kane asked. "The way everyone always asked about you first. How's your sister doing? Is her blood sugar okay? Does she need anything? Like I didn't exist unless it was in relation to your disease." It was very unpleasant to watch Kane examine her sister's physical condition as if she were rehearsing for a theater part. She memorized those specific tremors and speech patterns. That amount of attention to lying makes me wonder what else is going on in her head, except jealousy. The room leaned slightly. I held the counter tighter. And the special meals, the counting carbs, the constant checking, everything revolved around keeping you alive while I just had to be grateful I was healthy. She laughed cruelly. "Do you know how invisible that makes you feel? To watch your parents panic over every number on your meter while your straight A's meant nothing." I wanted to protest, to tell her she was mistaken, but my energy was dwindling. The ketones were accumulating faster now. My breathing was becoming heavier. "That's why I had to do it," she explained. "I had to show them what it felt like to worry about me for once, to rush me to appointments, to check on me in the night, to put my needs first." "But it was all made up," I managed to say. "So what?" The attention was real. The concern was real. For once, I mattered as much as you. She held out the vials again. "And now I'm going to matter more, because when you tell them you helped me, they'll realize you're not the perfect sick child they thought you were. You're just as capable of manipulation as anyone else." My legs were becoming unsteady. I needed to sit down, but I couldn't demonstrate weakness. Not yet. "The thing is," Kane went on, "I actually got pretty good at faking lows. The shaking, the confusion, the way your eyes go unfocused. I practiced in the mirror for hours. But you know what I could never fake? This." She was saying to me. "The way your skin gets that weird dry flush, the fruity smell on your breath, the way you keep swallowing because your mouth is so dry. That's real diabetes. That's what's going to kill you if you don't agree to my terms." I could feel my heart beating, attempting to pump the thickened blood through my system. The insulin in her palm was my only hope. I couldn't offer her what she wanted. If I informed our parents that I had helped her fake diabetes, they would never trust me again. Every genuine symptom I experienced would be questioned. Every emergency would be questioned. "Tick-tock," Kane stated. "How high can you go? 500? 600? I've seen your meter error out at 600 before. Remember you were so sick you couldn't even stand up?" The memory made me sway. That was one of the worst days of my life. And now I was headed back there. But this time, the insulin was right in front of me, held hostage by my sister. "You're sweating," she noted. "That's new. Usually you get all dry and flushed. Must be the adrenaline mixing with the high blood sugar. Your body doesn't know whether to panic or shut down." She was correct. I was torn between the fight-or-flight instinct and the rising lethargy of DKA. My muscles were weak yet stiff, ready to jump if I saw an opportunity. "I'll make it easy for you," Kane said. Just nod yes, and I'll hand over one vial. Enough to get you through until you can properly agree to my terms. Otherwise," she shifted her hand back toward the disposal. The grinding sound from before echoed in my mind. Thousands of dollars worth of life-saving medication were destroyed in seconds. I thought of all the diabetics who had to ration their insulin because they couldn't afford it. And here was my sister, trashing it out of spite. "You're thinking too hard," she replied. "This isn't a logic puzzle. It's simple. Your life or your reputation? What matters more?" Everything began to feel remote, like if I were observing the spectacle from outside my body. This was a bad indicator. Severe DKA can result in confusion, delirium, and even hallucinations. I needed to act before losing my ability to think rationally. "One nod," Kane urged. "That's all. Just move your head down and up, and this nightmare ends." But I knew it wasn't going to end. Even if I complied and told our parents the falsehood she desired, Kane would hold this against me indefinitely. Every time she desired something, she threatened to reveal the truth. Or worst, she'd do it again. I'd live my entire life at her mercy, never knowing when she'd steal my insulin and make me suffer. "You're running out of time," she explained. "I can see it in your eyes. They're getting that glassy look. How long before you can't even understand what I'm saying?" The kitchen felt like it was slowly spinning. I tried to concentrate on her face, but it kept moving in and out of focus. My breathing was clearly faster now, as my body tried furiously to clear the extra acid in my blood. "This is what you put Mom and Dad through every time you have a crisis," Kane told them. "This fear, this helplessness, except they can't fix it by just nodding. They have to watch you suffer and hope the insulin works in time." I wanted to explain that I never intended to scare them, but my tongue felt thick and awkward. The words wouldn't come out correctly. "Last chance," she explained, raising the vials. "Nod now, or I flush the rest." I weighed my options while fighting the rising fog in my mind. The kitchen clock displayed 8:47 a.m. My folks would not return from Black Friday shopping until at least noon. 3 hours. My blood sugar was now rising above 400, judging by the symptoms. The metallic flavor intensified with each swallow. Kane spotted my gaze at the clock and smiled bigger. She brought the vials closer to the disposal, allowing them to clink against the metal rim. The sound caused my stomach to clench. She held each vial, which represented a day of existence, like a toy. My legs buckled slightly. I caught myself on the counter, but Kane noticed my frailty. She leaned forward and studied my worsening condition with interest. Her research had prepared her well. She knew exactly what was going on inside my body. The need for water grew tremendous. My tongue was trapped on the roof of my mouth. I attempted to wet my lips, but there was no saliva remaining. Kane noticed this as well. She approached the cupboard, took out a glass, and filled it with cold water from the faucet. She sipped carefully and kept eye contact the entire time. "I've made a decision." Lunging was no longer an option. My reactions were too slow, and my muscles had already weakened from thirst. But I was still able to think, at least for now. I nodded once, just enough for her to notice. Kane's eyes shone with triumph. She placed down the water glass and picked up a vial, inspecting it like a prize. Then she shook her head, laughing. The vial returned with the others. She stated that simply nodding wasn't enough. She asked to hear me practice the story beforehand. Every detail had to be right, including how I allegedly taught her to fake symptoms, how we planned it together, and how I assisted her in researching diabetes to make her performance credible. She wanted me to rehearse until everything sounded natural. My eyesight swirled. The kitchen tiles beneath my feet appeared to ripple. I held the counter tighter, my claws sinking into the laminate. The struggle to stand was becoming tremendous. My body was eating itself, converting muscle and fat into energy it couldn't use. Kane grabbed out her phone and began recording. She wanted video footage of my confession, proving that I was coherent and spoke freely. She positioned the phone on the counter and adjusted the angle to capture both of us. I opened my mouth to speak, but only a croak came out. My throat was quite dry. Kane breathed deeply and slid the water glass across the countertop. I grabbed it desperately, swallowing the entire contents. The relief lasted only a moment. Within seconds, the thirst had returned, worse than before. She demanded that I start talking. I started stammering through her fake story, but my words muddled together. The head fog was increasing. Simple statements became complex problems. Kane became angry with my performance. She made me start over twice, each time threatening the insulin if I stumbled. The nausea struck suddenly. I doubled over, dry heaving into the sink. Nothing came up but bile. My stomach was empty since dinner the night before. Kane stepped back, disgusted, but continued filming. She narrated my symptoms to the camera, treating my deterioration as a science experiment. When the heaving subsided, I collapsed against the countertop. My legs shook uncontrollably. Not the trained shaking of hypoglycemia, but the weakness caused by the body shutting down. I slid to the floor and backed up against the cabinets. The cool tiles felt lovely on my hot skin. Kane crouched down to my level, leaving the insulin vials visible. She reminded me that we were not finished. The confession had to be comprehensive and persuasive, but thinking coherently was becoming impossible. Words flew away before I could comprehend them. She became annoyed with my faltering speech. She stood up and paced the kitchen, grumbling about timing. She needed me to be functional enough to confess while also being sick enough to be appreciative. The window was narrowing. She checked her phone, estimating when our parents would return. I attempted to stand, but my legs would not cooperate. The room whirled violently. I closed my eyes, but the sickness intensified. My breathing had become fast and shallow as my body attempted to release the accumulating acid through my lungs. Every breath felt insufficient. Kane recognized my breathing rhythm and nodded understanding. She had also researched this. 2 small respirations, she joyfully stated. Deep, laborious breathing indicated that the acid levels were approaching critical. She calculated that I had about an hour before my consciousness became doubtful. The confessional attempt resumed. She helped me through the words, but my responses became increasingly unintelligible. Frustration crossed her face. Her ideal plan required my cooperation, but my body was weakening faster than she had expected. She decided to try something new. She grabbed a notepad from the cabinet and scribbled the confession herself. All I needed to do was reproduce it in my own handwriting. She thrust the pen at me, but my hands were too shaky to hold it correctly. The pen clattered to the ground. My vision tunneled. Dark dots danced over the edges. Kane's transition from jealous sister to part-time doctor was quite the professional change. Studying symptoms as if she were preparing for medical school rather than just plain blackmail. I blinked quickly, hoping to dispel them, but they multiplied. Kane's face faded into an unclear shape. Her voice seemed distant, as if she were speaking from another room. She slapped my face lightly, attempting to regain attention. The interaction felt odd and distant from my body. She was losing her window. If I passed out before admitting, she would lose her leverage. She'd have to administer the insulin or risk my death, which would destroy everything. The subsequent wave of nausea was intense. This time, my stomach had something to expel. The bile scorched my throat. Kane jumped back and cursed. She grabbed some paper towels and threw them at me in disgust. The smell exacerbated the nausea. She announced a fresh plan. If I was unable to talk or write, she would accept a video of me nodding along while she delivered the story. Simple affirmative responses to her inquiries. She moved the phone and resumed filming, but nodding was becoming harder. My neck muscles felt weak and unable to support my head properly. It leaned to one side. Kane grabbed my chin and forced me to look at the camera. Her touch felt scorching on my damp skin. The questioning started. Did you help me fake diabetes? A faint nod. Did you teach me about the symptoms? Another nod. But my movements were so little and unsure that even Kane could tell they wouldn't persuade anyone. She needed me to be more coherent. She made a decision. Opening one bottle, she drew a tiny amount of insulin into a syringe. Not enough to save me, but enough to keep me stable momentarily. She would administer little dosages, keeping me functional yet reliant. Control is achieved by chemistry. The needle reached my arm. I attempted to pull away but lacked the strength. Then a sound made us both freeze. The automobile door banged outside. Kane hurried to the window and peered through the blinds. Mrs. Callahan, our elderly neighbor, was grabbing her daily newspaper. Kane waited until Mrs. Callahan went back inside. The interruption had upset her. She had not considered the possibility that others would notice something incorrect. The neighborhood was normally peaceful, but everyone was home for the holiday weekend. She returned and found me slumped lower down the cabinets. My breathing was more difficult, with each inhale requiring deliberate effort. The insulin in her hand symbolized salvation, but she paused. If she gave me some, she'd lose some control. Instead, she tried another approach. She reminded me of all the times I'd received attention for my diabetes, including hospital visits, concerned teachers, and special accommodations. She enumerated them as if they were crimes, arguing that she deserved to feign the same condition. Her words slipped in and out of my mind. I heard snippets about fairness, being seen, and years of invisibility. Understanding, however, needed energy that I lacked. My body was storing nutrients for basic existence. The doorbell rang. We were both astonished. Kane's eyes widened with panic. She had not anticipated anyone. I could see a delivery truck outside my kitchen window. The driver stood at our front door, holding a parcel and ringing again. Kane had to respond or face suspicion. She hurriedly buried the insulin bottles in her pocket and brandished the knife at me, a silent threat to keep quiet. She then collected herself and headed to the front door. I overheard muted discussion. The driver wanted a signature. Kane's voice sounded overly cheery as he expressed gratitude for working the holiday. The door closed. Her footsteps returned, hurried and agitated. She discovered me crawling near the landline phone in the living room. I had made it about 3 feet. My arms shook from the strain. She grabbed my ankle and dragged me back into the kitchen. The movement caused my vision to become white. Her former calm had given way to anger. The interruption demonstrated how vulnerable her plan was. Anyone can show up. Our folks might return early. A neighbor may detect something incorrect. She needed to finish it soon. She took out the remaining vials and lined them up on the counter. She explained what each meant one by one. This one was for the birthday party you ruined. This one for the family vacation that became about your medical needs. This one for every time mom checked on you at night instead of me. The disposal hummed into existence. She held the first vial over it, studying my face, but I couldn't concentrate on her anymore. The room had developed a dreamy quality. Nothing felt genuine save the scorching sensation in my veins and the desperate need for air. She dropped the vial. The grinding sound lasted seconds, and thousands of dollars worth of drugs were destroyed. She grabbed the next one, then the next. Each destruction is accompanied by another grievance. Another time she felt overlooked. Only 2 vials remained. My body convulsed, with muscles cramping due to dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. The agony broke through the fog briefly. Kane observed with clinical attention. She had never observed this sign in her study. Real pain seems to differ from performance. She knelt beside me again, holding the final 2 vials. Her offer had altered. She no longer required a full confession, only an agreement that I would keep silent about what she had done. Allow her to tell any story she wants. In exchange, I would receive enough insulin to survive. I attempted to process her words, but they scattered like smoke. My brain was starving for glucose, which it couldn't obtain. Neural circuits misfired. Reality was fragmented into separate moments. Kane's face, the vials, the knife, the ticking clock. She grabbed my shoulders and shook me. My head slumped, uselessly. She was losing me, and she realized it. Her carefully timed scheme was unraveling. She hadn't realized how swiftly DKA progressed. How severe the body's collapse could be. A fresh sound. My phone is ringing upstairs. I assigned Mom a ringtone. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Kane's expression was one of genuine terror. If our parents were trying to reach us, they may get home early. She took a desperate decision. She drew insulin from 1 vial and produced the right amount. Not the modest amount from before, but enough to be useful. She would give me this shot, stabilize me, and then compel the agreement once I was coherent. The needle plunged into my arm, allowing cold insulin to enter dying tissue. It would take some time, perhaps 20 minutes, to see any improvement. Kane sat back and waited, retaining the final vial as insurance. However, she had made another calculation error. The doorbell rang once again. This time the voice calling through the door was familiar. Mrs. Callahan inquired whether everything was okay. She had noticed the delivery driver go fast. We noticed our parents' automobile was gone. I'm worried about us being alone. Kane froze. Mrs. Callahan was a persistent neighbor who cooked cookies and kept an eye on everyone. She would not depart easily. Her voice carried through the door, noting that she had brought leftover pie from Thanksgiving. I tried to shout out but could only utter a feeble whimper. Kane slapped her hand over my mouth, her fists sweating from fright. Mrs. Callahan knocked again, more forcefully this time. She said she was scared and might call our parents. That danger roused Kane. She couldn't have Mrs. Callahan phone our parents and tell them to come home. She stood, smoothed her hair, and approached the door. Her voice shook slightly as she explained that we were all right and had just slept in. Mrs. Callahan was not convinced. She asked to see me especially, adding that she was aware of my diabetes and was concerned when she did not see me outside as usual. Kane attempted excuses, but Mrs. Callahan's tone became increasingly anxious. The talk continued. I could sense mistrust creeping into her voice. Kane was talking too quickly and over-explaining. The insulin was beginning to work, clearing my mind slightly. I needed to create some noise. Any noise. I knocked over the water glass. It broke over the tile floor. The sound was unmistakable. Mrs. Callahan raised her voice, wanting to know what that was. Kane claimed I had spilled something in the kitchen and everything was okay. But Mrs. Callahan had reared 3 children. She recognized when anything was awry. She said she was going to phone 911 if Kane didn't open the door fully and let her see me. The threat was real. Mrs. Callahan didn't lie. Kane returned to the kitchen, frantic. Her scheme was failing. She couldn't allow Mrs. Callahan call for help, but she couldn't let her see me this way. She seized the final insulin vial and held it as a negotiating chip. She yelled that I only had one chance to tell Mrs. Callahan that I was all right and merely felt sick from something I ate. Make her depart. If I said anything else, she'd destroy the final vial and flee before help arrived. I'd be left explaining everything while dying. The insulin was functioning slowly. My thoughts became less fragmented, but my body remained weak. Mrs. Callahan threatened to use the spare key she had for emergencies. Our parents had given it to her years before. Kane helped me to my feet, supporting the majority of my weight. We stumbled to the front door together. She hissed final threats into my ear. One incorrect word, and the last vial would be gone. She would allege that I had destroyed my own insulin in a fit of rage. The door opened partially. Mrs. Callahan's anxious expression appeared in the gap. Her gaze quickly fell on mine, taking in my pale skin, heavy breathing, and obvious anguish. Her face hardened with concern. I opened my mouth. The words that came out astounded everyone, including myself. I asked Mrs. Callahan if she still had any of the special tea from her garden that helped with nausea. My voice was feeble but clear enough. Mrs. Callahan's eyes narrowed. She has known me since I was 5. She knew I despised tea, particularly her harsh herbal concoctions, but she played along, claiming she'd go grab some right now. She'd be back in 5 minutes. Kane attempted to close the door, relieved, but Mrs. Callahan's foot prevented it. She looked at me and asked if I had lately checked my blood sugar. A simple inquiry, yet full with importance. She recognized the indicators of a diabetic crisis. Mrs. Callahan arriving with a pie and sleuthing talents is like watching someone's grandmother transform into Sherlock Holmes. She recognizes the "we're fine" voice from 3 blocks away. I nodded, pretended everything was all right, but my hand moved to my pocket, where I normally kept my glucose meter. The motion was slight, but deliberate. The pocket is empty. No meter. Mrs. Callahan's expression changed. She understood. She stated loudly that she would get the tea and contact my parents to inform them that I was not feeling well. Kane objected, but Mrs. Callahan was already walking away at a faster pace than her 70 years should allow. She felt something was very wrong. Kane slammed the door. Rage replaced her previous calculation. Everything was coming apart. She had minutes before Mrs. Callahan dialed 911 or contacted our parents. Perhaps both. The game was ended. She hauled me back into the kitchen, forcing me against the counter. The last vial came from her pocket. She held it over the disposal one last time. If she was going down, she'd bring me with her. Mutual annihilation, rather than defeat. But the insulin was working better now. My mind was clear enough to plan strategically. I warned her that destroying the remaining vial would require her to justify my death. That is something no story would cover. She would go to prison. Real prison, not simply family repercussions. She paused. I pressed on, words flowing more easily now. If she gave me the insulin, I would tell everyone that I had accidentally destroyed my supply. A dumb error made while half asleep. She could confirm the story. Be the hero who helps me get through the situation. Our parents would forgive her past lies in light of her assistance. The offer lingered between us. Kane calculated quickly. She could hear Mrs. Callahan's voice outside, most likely on her phone. Time was running out. Either she decided to fully ruin me or she salvaged everything she could. Sirens in the distance, faint but increasing louder. Mrs. Callahan had not waited. Help was on the way. Kane's decision-making window was narrowing by the second. She looked at the vial, then at me, and finally at the door. She made her decision. The vial flew across the room and smashed into the wall. Glass pieces and valuable insulin spilled across the floor. The last vestige of my salvation was shattered in an act of spite. Kane smiled coldly. If she couldn't win, neither would we. But I grinned back. Because during our tussle, while she was preoccupied by Mrs. Callahan, I did something she didn't notice. The syringe she had used earlier, the one with a partial dose, had rolled beneath the counter. I grabbed it as she tugged me towards the door. There was still insulin within it. Not much, perhaps 2 units, but enough to keep me going till 8 arrived. I'd hidden it in my waistband and waited. As the sirens grew louder, I pulled it out and injected the remaining amount. Kane's face turned white. She had not wrecked everything after all. Her last act of cruelty had failed. She rushed for the rear door, but it was too late. Red and blue lights were already flashing in the windows. Mrs. Callahan gave them our address. Mrs. Callahan followed the paramedics through the front door, holding her spare key. They discovered me on the kitchen floor, conscious but weak, surrounded by broken glass and ruined medical supplies. Kane stood motionless near the back door, torn between running and facing punishment. The following few minutes passed quickly, paramedics checking vital signs, establishing IV lines, and delivering emergency dextrose. Police officers arrive and take in the scene. Mrs. Callahan explained what she had witnessed. Kane attempted to spin stories that collapsed upon basic examination. My blood sugar levels gradually returned to normal. The immediate danger was past, but I would still need hospital supervision. As they carried me onto a gurney, I overheard Kane inform detectives that I had destroyed my own insulin during an argument. But the facts revealed a different story. The knife she'd threatened me with was still on the counter. She'd shot a video on her phone of my deteriorating state and her demands. The wreckage in the kitchen, including glass shards with insulin residue, presented a clear picture of what had happened. Our parents arrived as the ambulance was about to leave. Mom's countenance changed from surprise to fear as the officers revealed what they had seen. Dad remained silent, pondering how terribly they had misjudged the situation. They'd fueled Kane's envy until it nearly killed me. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. I watched the IV drip steadily into my arm, each drop containing the insulin that my body sorely required. The paramedics stabilized me in the ambulance, but the physicians wanted me to be monitored for at least 24 hours. My blood sugar measurements revealed the extreme fluctuations of the previous few hours, indicating how close I'd come to a diabetic coma. Mom sat in the chair next to my bed, her cheeks swollen from crying. She had been apologizing non-stop since we arrived at the hospital, but I was too fatigued to respond. Dad strolled by the window, periodically pausing to look at the parking lot below. They hadn't uttered Kane's name since the police had taken her away. A nurse came in to check my vital signs. She changed the insulin drip based on my most recent glucose reading, then left us in silence again. The constant beeping of monitors filled the hole where discussion should have existed. My throat was still sore from vomiting, and every muscle ached from acute dehydration. Mrs. Callahan appeared in the doorway, holding a small potted plant. She had changed out of her morning robe and into decent clothes, but her face still betrayed the strain of the morning's events. Mom stood to hug her, and new tears flowed. They whispered quietly near the door, and I feigned to sleep. The detective arrived 1 hour later. He seemed younger than I had expected, with friendly eyes and a soft demeanor. He drew up a chair and asked if I was feeling good enough to make a statement. Mom began to argue, but I simply nodded. The story had to be conveyed while the details were fresh. I walked him through everything, from finding my empty insulin pump to Kane's ultimate destructive act. He took detailed notes and occasionally asked for clarification. When I revealed the video Kane had captured on her phone, he took great note. The evidence would be critical. The detective described what would come next. Kane faced charges of reckless endangerment and property destruction. The value of the damaged insulin alone rendered it a criminal, compounded with the intentional withholding of life-saving medication. She faced significant penalties. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I glanced at my parents, saw their tears, and nodded again. After he went, the silence became more intense than before. Dad eventually stopped pacing and sat in the opposite chair. He stretched for my hand and squeezed it softly. His calloused fingers twitched briefly. Mom sat on the bed's edge, taking care not to disrupt the IV line. They told me about uncovering Kane's diary months ago and dismissing it as teenage drama. About the warning flags they'd disregarded, preferring to accept her performances rather than confront the unpleasant truth. About how they had failed both of their girls in various ways. Their comments were confused, punctuated by sobs and extended pauses. The next visitor was a social worker. She was older, with her gray hair tied up into a practical bun. She inquired about my home circumstances, and whether I felt secure returning there. Despite the fact that the query was ludicrous, I grasped the protocol. She distributed papers about family therapy and support organizations for families struggling with medical abuse. The endocrinologist arrived for the evening rounds. Dr. Patel had been my doctor since the diagnosis, and her familiar face provided unexpected comfort. She studied my file and adjusted my insulin regimen to account for the damage my body had been through. She mentioned that stress could impair my blood sugar control for several weeks, necessitating greater monitoring. Night fell outside the window. The hospital cafeteria had long since closed, but Dad discovered vending machines elsewhere. He returned with an armload of goodies, desperate to do something useful. I managed to eat a few crackers, my stomach still upset from the day's events. Mom's phone rang continuously. Family relatives had heard that anything was awry. She stepped into the corridor to answer calls, her voice muffled by the door. I heard snippets about Kane, charges, and not knowing what would happen next. She seemed to lose energy with each talk. The night nurse was older and more professional. She measured my blood sugar every 2 hours, pricking my fingertips with precise precision. The numbers were slowly stabilizing, and my body was gradually returning to normal patterns. She brought extra blankets without being asked, realizing the bone-chilling cold that occurred with severe DKA. I slept fitfully in between blood sugar checks. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Kane holding the vials above the disposal. The grinding sound echoed in my dreams. I'd wake up gasping, convinced that my insulin pump was once again beeping empty. Mom would squeeze my hand to remind me where I was. The morning brought new doctors and discussions about discharge preparation. The psychiatrist was called in following what they described as a terrible event. She questioned me carefully about my mental state, looking for signs of post-traumatic stress. I answered honestly about the nightmares, the anxiety about my insulin supply, and the panic that had not yet subsided. Physical treatment followed next. The acute dehydration had made me weaker than expected. The therapist helped me wander the hospital halls, gradually regaining strength. My legs shook with each stride, the muscles screaming their experience. She informed me that this was typical and that healing will take time. The pharmacist delivered my fresh insulin supply right to my room. The pharmacist checked each vial with me, validating the prescription and expiration dates. Mom stared anxiously as I checked each one, her hand hanging near the bag, as if she could protect it by proximity. Dad inquired about purchasing a lockbox for home storage. It makes me wonder what Kane is telling herself right now in that holding cell, while her family picks up the pieces of her mistake. The fact that she simply ran as the siren sounded demonstrates how meticulously planned this entire operation was. Discharge planning began following lunch. The case manager talked about follow-up appointments, emergency measures, and safety planning. She added that Kane would not be permitted near me once he was released on bond and that a restraining order was already being processed. The statements felt weird, as if we were talking a stranger rather than my sister. Mrs. Callahan returned that afternoon, bringing homemade soup. She'd been cooking all morning, she explained, having to do something with her hands. She sat with Mom while I sipped the broth, the two women finding solace in their shared stillness. Before leaving, she put a spare key into Mom's palm, insisting on keeping it for emergencies. The insurance coordinator appeared carrying documentation. The destroyed insulin would be covered by our policy's emergency replacement clause. She led us through the paperwork, clarifying the coverage for the hospital stay and follow-up care. Dad inquired about therapy coverage, his tone carefully neutral. My normal insulin pump required replacement following the trauma. The diabetes educator brought a new one and went over the setup procedure systematically. My hands shook as I primed the tube, muscle memory clashing with recent trauma. She was patient, allowing me to complete each step at my own time. The evening brought additional visitors. My aunt came from 2 states distant, having driven all day after Mom's call. She hugged me gently, keeping the IV in mind, before turning to my parents. I overheard furious whispers in the hallway. Accusations of helping Kane and ignoring warning flags. The night shift arrived again, with different nurses but the same blood sugar tests and vital signs. I slept better. Exhaustion eventually overcame apprehension. The dreams persisted, but they were less vivid as my mind began to digest the trauma in manageable chunks. The second morning brought discharge paperwork. Dr. Patel conducted a last assessment and declared me stable enough for home care. She modified my insulin ratios again to account for the stress hormones that were still flooding my system. She planned follow-up sessions for the following week, intending to closely monitor my recuperation. The discharge nurse ran through a thorough checklist. Medication verification, follow-up appointments confirmed, and emergency contact information updated. She asked me to demonstrate making up insulin and monitoring my blood sugar. Standard practice, but suddenly imbued with new significance. Mom studied each movement as if she were memorizing the processes. Dad had brought fresh clothing from home. It seemed unusual to get dressed after 2 days in a hospital robe. My jeans hung loose, since dehydration had taken away water weight. The simple effort of lacing my shoes left me breathless, as my body was still recovering from its ordeal. Despite my concerns, the wheelchair ride to the exit was necessary under hospital protocol. Dad turned the car around as Mom gathered the piled belongings: flowers from relatives, get-well cards from neighbors who had heard the news, and unread booklets for family counseling. Except for the radio, which played quietly, the drive home was silent. I sat in the back seat, watching familiar streets pass by. Everything looked the same, yet it felt strange, as if I had returned to a foreign nation. Mom kept turning to check on me, her seatbelt tightening with each movement. Our house was precisely as we left it 3 days ago. The Black Friday sale paper was still on the kitchen table. Kane's coffee mug sat in the sink unwashed. Normalcy felt disgusting after everything that had occurred. Dad quickly began gathering Kane's possessions from common places and placing them in boxes. I hesitated in the kitchen's doorway, unable to enter. The broken glass had been cleaned up, and the insulin residue had been mopped away, but I could still see everything: the counter where I'd grasped for support, the sink where I'd vomited, and the spot where I fainted. Mom gently led me to the living room instead. The lockbox was delivered that afternoon. Dad promptly installed it in my bedroom closet, including a combination lock for further security. We packed my insulin supplies inside, counting each vial twice. He gave me the combination and had me practice opening it numerous times. Mom jotted it down and hid the paper in her jewelry box. My bedroom seemed like both a sanctuary and a jail. Everything was precisely as I had left it, yet Kane's presence remained. I found one of my old glucose meters in my desk drawer, which she must have overlooked during her search. The finding caused me to quiver uncontrollably, until Mom held me still. Nobody felt like preparing dinner, so we had takeout. We ate in the living room rather than at the dining table, where so many family dramas had taken place. The food tasted like cardboard, but I forced it down since I knew my blood sugar needed to be stable. Dad constantly reviewed the nutrition information, calculating carbs with renewed zeal. The doorbell rang after dark. We all froze, the sound causing additional concern. It was just another neighbor handing off a casserole and showing care. Mom gladly received it, while Dad and I stayed hidden in the living room. The routine of suburban kindness felt foreign to our new life. Bedtime introduced new challenges. I checked my insulin supply 3 times before attempting to sleep. Mom offered to remain in my room, but I declined. I needed to face this alone to start rebuilding my sense of security. She compromised by leaving both of our doors open and pledging to listen for any distress. Sleep came in bits. I awoke every few hours to check my blood sugar, a ritual tinted with paranoia. Each reading was normal, but I double-checked nevertheless. The insulin pump buzzed softly on my bedside, its familiar sound both soothing and disturbing. Morning arrived, and Mom was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She'd spent the night researching low-glycemic meals, trying to help me better control my diabetes. Dad sat at the table with a notebook, jotting out questions for the lawyer he had contacted. The facade of a typical family meal felt strained, yet necessary. The pharmacy contacted to check that my medication refills were ready. Mom insisted on picking them up right away, despite having just gotten the hospital supply. She returned with bags of goods including enough insulin for a month. We added it all to the lockbox and the accumulating stockpile provided palpable reassurance. Dr. Patel's office called to confirm my follow-up visit. The receptionist indicated that they had scheduled extra time to the appointment because they knew this would be more than just standard diabetes control. Mom marked it on 3 different calendars, her anxiousness manifested as over-preparation. I spent the afternoon incessantly checking my blood sugar. Every minor indication caused panic. Was I thirsty due to elevated blood sugar or dehydration? Did my hands shake due to low blood sugar or leftover trauma? Mom eventually buried my additional test strips, confining me to the specified checking schedule. The detective called with updates. Kane had posted bail but was living with a friend across town. The restraining order was officially in effect. He stated that the prosecution was taking the matter seriously due to the life-threatening nature of her activities. Court dates would be scheduled shortly. Dinner was another quiet occasion. We've already created a new routine, dining in the living room to avoid the kitchen's recollections. Dad had begun looking at home security systems, giving us options on his tablet: motion sensors, cameras, alarm systems, anything to restore our sense of security. The counselor called to set up our first family session. Mom contacted several before settling on one who specializes in medical trauma and family dysfunction. The first appointment was scheduled for next week, allowing us to digest the immediate problem before delving into more serious topics. Night fell, bringing with it the same fears. I checked the insulin supply twice more, despite the fact that nothing had changed. Mom had kept a note of every vial's location and expiration date. Dad installed a baby monitor in my room, explaining it was only temporary, until everything felt normal again. The second night home was slightly better. I only awoke twice to check blood glucose and once to verify my insulin supplies. Mom arrived at my doorway during one check, wordlessly verifying that she was still keeping vigil. We nodded at each other in the dark, silently acknowledging our new reality. Morning signaled the start of routine: breakfast, blood sugar check, insulin dose, and everything in the diary. Mom observed but did not hover as much. Dad went to work grudgingly, calling twice before lunch to check in. The place felt lighter without his nervous presence. I entered the kitchen for the first time since getting home. The familiar area felt strange, with each surface containing invisible memories. Mom found me standing motionless by the sink, unable to move forward or backward. She guided me gently through the process of preparing tea, recovering the room one small step at a time. The mail included medical bills and insurance papers. Mom went through them systematically, making files for everything connected to the tragedy. She had already begun the appeals procedure for the damaged insulin, determined to have Kane's acts documented in every system available. Mrs. Callahan came by with more food and a listening ear. She told us about her own family's hardships, normalizing, but not reducing our sorrow. Before she left, she made us pledge to use the spare key whenever we needed it, day or night. Her strong protectiveness moved Mom to tears once more. I spent the afternoon reorganizing my diabetes supplies. We placed many emergency kits strategically throughout the house. Each included glucose pills, a backup meter, and ketone test strips. Dad branded each one with bright red tape, making them easy to spot. Dad becomes a security system specialist, while Mom becomes a meal prep champion, demonstrating how tragedy causes everyone to suddenly pick up new hobbies they never asked for. Dr. Patel's follow-up consultation indicated that my physical rehabilitation was going nicely. My blood sugar levels were normalizing, albeit they still showed stress-related increases. She changed my insulin ratios again and suggested continuous glucose monitoring for further peace of mind. The technology would alert us to potentially dangerous tendencies before they escalated. Mom broke down totally throughout the drive home. She pulled over, weeping for failing to protect me, condoning Kane's actions, and ignoring 1,000 minor warning signs. I held her hand while she grieved, and we both realized that healing would come in waves. Dad had dinner ready, having left work early to cook. He'd created my favorite childhood meal, hoping to instill new pleasant memories in our kitchen. We ate together at the dining table for the first time since the incident, recovering yet another piece of our house. The evening brought tiredness, but also a curious tranquility. We had survived another day. My blood glucose had remained constant. The insulin stayed safely stored away. These modest successes were tremendous. Mom advised that we watch a light, distracting movie together. Bedtime brought less anxiety. I simply checked my supplies once and took my blood sugar normally. Mom kissed my forehead goodnight, a gesture she hadn't done since I was a child. Dad double-checked the new alarm system before he retired. We were starting to feel safe again. The night proceeded smoothly. I barely awoke once, more out of habit than necessity. My blood sugar was excellent, and my insulin pump was humming continuously. I lay in the dark, listening to the familiar noises of home, and felt something inside begin to unwind. The morning dawned with possibilities. The trauma would always be present, ingrained into our family's fabric. But we were learning to live with the wounds, creating new habits around them. Mom prepared breakfast without hovering. Dad departed for work with only one check-in call scheduled. I sat at the kitchen table, the exact place where it began, and took my morning insulin without hesitation. The simple action felt like recovering power. Mom looked at me across the table, hope returning to her eyes. Life would continue, albeit with heightened vigilance and hard-won insight. My father handed the company to my golden boy brother at his 60th birthday, so I quit overnight and built a rival empire that crushed them. I've been lurking on Reddit for years, reading stories like this, and never imagined I'd have one to contribute. But, after what happened last month, I need to get this off my chest, since it has been eating me alive. 34 years old, and this entire situation began when I was a child but truly burst about 2 years ago. To understand why everything went so well, you must first understand my family's destructive dynamics. My father Robert is 62 years old and owns Harrington & Sons, a medium-sized construction company. I started it from nothing in the 1980s. It grew to roughly 50 staff, working on commercial and residential projects across 3 counties. Growing up, that corporation was practically our religion. Every dinner conversation revolved around jobs, contracts, which teams were performing, and which suppliers were providing us with the best deals. The and Sons section was supposed to refer to me and my younger brother Ryan, a 29-year-old guy. Dad made this plain from the moment we could walk. "Someday you boys are going to take over this empire I built," he'd say, usually while staring at blueprints on our kitchen table. "Harrington & Sons is going to be your legacy." But here's where things go wrong. Dad decided Ryan was the actual construction worker, and I was just a liability he'd have to deal with. Ryan was one of those kids who seemed to excel at every athletic activity. He was a star athlete in high school and could fix engines by the age of 14. He exuded an air of effortless assurance that drew others in. "Dad ate that fucked up. Look at Ryan," he'd boast to anyone who listened. "Kid's got natural leadership. Born for this business." Meanwhile, I was the one who was paying attention in class, learning about business management, cost estimation, and project management software certification. I'd spend my summers working on Dad's job sites. Instead of being applauded for grasping the technical aspect, I was reprimanded for not being hands-on enough. The tipping point came when I was 19 and suggested that Dad computerize the business processes. It was 2009, and he was still doing everything on paper: estimates, scheduling, payroll, and inventory. It was a nightmare. I discovered a construction management software that could streamline everything, save money, and eliminate errors. Dad's response: "Real construction workers don't need computers, son. We build things with our hands, not by staring at screens all day." Ryan, who was 14 at the time and hardly knew which end of a hammer to handle, nodded along as if he understood anything about operating a business. "Yeah, Mark, construction is about getting dirty, not playing with gadgets." This became the theme of my life. Every time I sought to implement modern business methods in the organization, I was told I was overthinking it or making everything too hard. Dad actually said, "College is fine, son, but this is the real world. You can't learn construction from a textbook." Ryan, on the other hand, dropped out of community college after only one semester because he didn't enjoy it. Dad's reaction: "Good for you, son. Real men learn by doing." I continued working for Dad throughout college and beyond graduation, hoping that he'd ultimately see that I understood the business aspect better than anyone else. I overhauled our filing systems, established proper project costing methods, and even constructed a simple database to manage equipment upkeep. All without being asked, and on my own time. But every family event, company BBQ, and supplier meeting had the same story. Ryan was the golden boy who truly understood the building business. And I was just Mark, the guy who was good at paperwork. The favoritism was ridiculous. Ryan would arrive late to job sites, spend half the day on his phone, then depart early for whatever party or date he had arranged. Dad would simply grin and remark, "Boys will be boys." I'd work 60-hour weeks, solve logistical issues, negotiate lower material costs, and get a shrug at best. When Ryan turned 21, Dad began discussing succession plans. Not to me. I discovered out about these chats after overhearing Mom conversing on the phone with her sister. Apparently, Dad was already planning to delegate additional authority to Ryan, despite the fact that Ryan had never managed anything more sophisticated than a 7-man framing crew. I tried to talk to Dad about it directly. This happened around 3 years ago, when I was 31 and had been in the company for more than a decade. I'd just completed our largest commercial contract ever, a $2.3 million office complex that came in under budget and ahead of schedule. "Dad," I began during a break one day, "I think we should talk about the future of the company. I've got ideas about expansion, maybe getting into some specialty niches. I've been researching." He shut me off. "Mark, you do good work. Don't get me wrong, but running this company takes a different kind of man than you are." I wasn't expecting it. "What do you mean?" "Construction is a tough business. You need someone who can command respect from the crews, someone who understands what it means to get his hands dirty. Ryan's got that natural authority. Men follow him." "Dad, I've been working on sites since I was 16. I know every aspect of this business better than—" "Knowing and leading are different things, son. Ryan's got what it takes to be the boss. You're more of a support guy. There's nothing wrong with that. Every good leader needs someone to handle the details." That conversation tormented me for several months. Support the guy. After everything I'd done, all the changes I'd made, and all the money I'd saved the company, I was only the support man. But the real kick in the teeth came 2 years ago, at Dad's 60th birthday celebration. He'd reserved the back room at this steakhouse, inviting the entire extended family, crucial staff, and some of our most important clients. I assumed it was just a birthday celebration. I was mistaken. About halfway through supper, Dad stood up and tapped his glass. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Turning 60 has got me thinking about the future, about legacy, about what kind of company I want to leave behind." My stomach began churning. I could see where this was headed. "Harrington & Sons has been my life's work," Dad explained. "But a man's got to know when it's time to pass the torch. That's why I'm proud to announce that Ryan Harrington will be taking over as president of Harrington & Sons, effective immediately." The audience gave a standing ovation. Ryan sprang up, grinning like he'd won the lottery, and hugged his father. Mom was shedding happy tears. I just sat there, witnessing my entire future be handed to my younger brother in front of 40 people. Ryan gave this statement about carrying on the Harrington legacy and moving the company into the future while maintaining traditional values. It was completely messed. The youngster couldn't tell the difference between gross margin and markup if his life depended on it, but everyone took it in. After the crowd dissipated, I cornered Dad in the parking lot. "What the hell was that?" I inquired. "You didn't even discuss this with me. I've been working for this company for 15 years. Dad sighed as if I were being ridiculous. Mark, I told you. Ryan's the right man for this job. He's got the personality for it. The leadership skills. Construction crews need someone they respect. Respect, Dad? Half our guys have been asking me for technical guidance since they started. I'm the one who... You're good at the technical stuff. I've never said you weren't. But running a construction company isn't about spreadsheets and computers. It's about being tough, making hard decisions, and commanding respect. I laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. Natural authority? Ryan's never managed a budget over $50,000. He doesn't know our insurance requirements. He's never dealt with permitting issues. He couldn't read a complex blueprint if you gave him a week. His face tightened. Son, I'm going to say this once. Ryan is the future of this company because he's man enough to handle it. Some people are born leaders, and some people are born followers. There's no shame in knowing which one you are. When he said those words, everything changed. You've never been man enough to run this business, Mark. You're too soft, too academic, and too concerned with everyone's feelings. Ryan's got the balls to make the tough calls. That's what it takes. I stood there in that parking lot, watching my father walk away from me as if I were just another disappointed employee rather than his son. That night I took a life-changing decision. If I wasn't man enough to lead Harrington & Sons, I'd demonstrate my true masculinity by creating something greater. The following morning, I strolled into Dad's office and resigned. You're making a mistake, son, he stated without looking up from his paperwork. Where are you going to go? You've never worked anywhere else. I didn't reply. Don't worry about me, Dad. I'll figure it out. Dad had no idea, and neither did anyone else in my family, that I had been silently preparing for this possibility for months. Throughout the evenings I worked late at the office. I documented everything: client lists, supplier relationships, pricing strategies, and project procedures. I'd been putting together a comprehensive picture of how Harrington & Sons operated, what our competitive advantages were, and more crucially, where our shortcomings were. I had also been networking. Construction is a relationship business, and over the course of 15 years, I'd developed strong relationships with subcontractors, suppliers, and even certain clients. People recognized my work, valued my attention to detail, and believed my word. Dad always believed Ryan's backslapping style was important, but the majority of our recurring business came from clients who knew I would personally oversee their projects. Within a week after resigning, I had submitted the paperwork to establish Pinnacle Construction Solutions. I deliberately chose the name Pinnacle, implying that we were the pinnacle of quality and professionalism, and Construction Solutions indicating that we addressed problems rather than simply throwing muscle at them. I started small, using my savings to rent a small office space in a nearby business park, purchasing some basic equipment, and hiring 2 people I'd worked with at Harrington & Sons who were fed up with Ryan's nasty management style. My first contract was for a small house remodeling around $15,000, which I could complete mostly by myself. But I had larger plans. One of Harrington & Sons' most serious flaws was a lack of technological proficiency. Dad's insistence on doing things the old way made them extremely inefficient in comparison to what was achievable. I'd spent years watching us lose money on projects due to bad scheduling, insufficient cost tracking, and communication breakdowns between the office and field team. I made significant investments in construction management software, project tracking systems, and mobile technologies for field teams. While Harrington & Sons still used paper timesheets and handwritten change orders, my team had tablets that allowed them to examine blueprints, submit daily reports, manage material usage, and interact instantaneously with the office. The efficiency gains were amazing. I could quote tasks more correctly because I had real-time cost information. Better communication mechanisms enabled me to detect problems before they became costly disasters. I could schedule more efficiently since I knew exactly where my staff were and what they were working on. More crucially, I could demonstrate to clients just what they were paying for. While Harrington & Sons continued to make broad estimations based on their experience, I was able to provide specific breakdowns of how their money would be spent. My second contract involved a $40,000 kitchen remodeling, followed by a $75,000 bathroom upgrade. Word spread about a new construction company that completed projects on schedule and within budget. I also focused on the commercial market, which Dad had always struggled with. He excelled at domestic and small commercial works, but anything demanding intricate coordination or rigorous adherence to laws made him anxious. I positioned Pinnacle as the organization capable of handling intricate projects such as medical facilities, educational buildings, and anything else that required specialist understanding. 6 months after launching Pinnacle, I secured my first major commercial contract, a $400,000 refurbishment of a medical office building. It was the type of job that Harrington & Sons would struggle with. There are numerous regulatory standards, strict deadlines, and no tolerance for errors. I crushed it. I finished 2 weeks early, 8% under budget, and the customer was so pleased that they quickly hired me for their next location. During this time, I seldom spoke with my family. Dad would occasionally call to see when I'd come to my senses and return to the family business. Ryan never called. He was probably too busy playing CEO. Mom would try to guilt me into attending family gatherings. "Your father misses you," she would remark. "This whole thing is just pride. You boys should work together." But I was no longer interested in working together. I wanted to prove a point. The breakthrough happened roughly 18 months after I started Pinnacle. I'd been developing relationships with general contractors who handled large commercial projects, portraying myself as a dependable subcontractor for specialized work. One of them approached me with a large project, a $2.8 million restoration of a business headquarters downtown. It was exactly the type of work Harrington & Sons had always desired but had never been qualified to do. Complex mechanical systems, high-end finishes, unrealistic deadlines, and a perfectionist client. I spent 3 weeks putting together my bid, which included cost estimates down to the cent, a full project timeline, comprehensive quality control systems, and references from every big task I had performed. When I submitted it, I knew it was flawless. I landed the job. More crucially, I outbid Harrington & Sons by $200,000, offering a faster completion time. The general contractor then told me that Harrington & Sons' concept appeared amateurish in comparison to mine. "Your documentation was incredible," the man said. Their bid was basically a number on a napkin with a handshake. That's when I knew I had Dad right where I needed him. The downtown headquarters project established my reputation. Not only did I accomplish it flawlessly, but I also finished ahead of schedule and under budget. The client was so impressed that he hired me for 2 additional locations. The general contractor began referring me for additional important jobs. Within 6 months of finishing the job, Pinnacle Construction Solutions had 15 workers and $8 million in contracted contracts. Meanwhile, Harrington & Sons were floundering. I wasn't immediately competing against them. I was pursuing larger, more difficult projects that they couldn't manage anyway. However, my accomplishment began to have an impact on their reputation through comparison. Potential clients would say, "We heard about this new company, Pinnacle Construction Solutions. They did that amazing headquarters renovation downtown. We're thinking of going with them instead." Contractors who used to subcontract with Harrington & Sons began to choose my company for specialized work. Suppliers began offering me better terms because my payment schedule was more consistent and my volume increased faster. The major blow came when I began targeting Harrington & Sons' core clientele directly. I had spent 15 years developing relationships with their customers. I knew exactly what they valued, what bothered them about working for Harrington & Sons, and what they'd pay more for. I created proposals that addressed each of their concerns. Thompson Industries had partnered with Harrington & Sons for 8 years. They completed approximately $300,000 in building maintenance and repair work each year. A steady source of income for Dad. I planned a meeting with their facilities manager, whom I had worked with dozens of times while at Harrington & Sons. "Mark," he remarked when I went into his office, "I heard you started your own company. How's that going?" "Really well," I answered. "Actually, that's why I'm here. I know you've been happy with Harrington & Sons, but I wanted to show you what we could do differently." I presented a thorough facilities management proposal that was unlike anything Harrington & Sons had ever offered. Rather than simply responding to problems as they arise, I proposed a proactive maintenance system that includes predictive scheduling, extensive reporting, and guaranteed response times. More importantly, I promised to perform it for 15% less than what they were paying Harrington & Sons while delivering superior service. "This is impressive," the facilities manager commented, flipping through my presentation. "Harrington & Sons never offered anything like this level of documentation and planning." "We're not Harrington & Sons," I corrected myself. "We're focused on solving problems, not just throwing labor at them." 2 weeks later, Thompson Industries terminated their contract with Harrington & Sons and signed with Pinnacle. That was only the beginning. Over the next 8 months, I diligently pursued every important Harrington & Sons client. I did not compete based just on pricing. I competed on value, offering services that Harrington & Sons were unable or unwilling to deliver. Advanced project management software allows clients to track progress in real time. Detailed cost reporting that revealed exactly how their money was spent. Guaranteed completion deadlines with penalties if we were late. Quality assurance processes that avoided the costly errors that had plagued some of Harrington & Sons' recent projects. One by one, Harrington & Sons' largest clients switched to Pinnacle Construction Solutions. Riverside Manufacturing, which made $500,000 per year, is no longer around. Central Medical Group, which earned $400,000 each year, has closed. Brookstone Property Management, $600,000 per year, gone. Each time a client transferred, I made sure to send Dad a courteous thank you note, assuring him that I would take excellent care of our mutual associates. The calls from Mom became more frequent. "Your father is worried about the business," she'd tell you. "Some of his oldest clients have left, and he believes there is someone spreading rumors about the company." I never informed him it was me. I assumed he would figure it out eventually. He did. The confrontation took place on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was in my workplace, a proper office now, 3,000 square feet with a conference room and capacity for 20 staff. When my receptionist called, "Mark, there's a Robert Harrington here to see you. He says he's your father." I grinned. "Send him back." Dad stepped into my office, appearing as if he'd aged 5 years in the 2 years since I left Harrington & Sons. His face was flushed, his hands shook slightly, and he had that expression he used to have when a task went horribly wrong. "You son of a bitch," he yelled before he even got through the door. "Nice to see you too, Dad, please take a seat." He did not sit down. Instead he stood in front of my desk, staring around my office as if he couldn't believe what he saw. "Thompson Industries, Riverside Manufacturing, Central Medical. You've been stealing my clients." "I haven't stolen anyone," I replied without arguing. "I've been offering better service at competitive prices. Last I checked, that's called business." "Business? This is sabotage. You're trying to destroy everything I built." I took a seat and studied him. "I'm not trying to destroy anything, Dad. I'm just showing the market what real construction management looks like." His expression changed. "Real construction management? Do you think you know something about construction that I don't?" "I do. I know how to leverage technology to improve efficiency, how to provide full information and transparency to clients, and how to regularly deliver projects on time and within budget." "And I assume Ryan doesn't know any of that," I smiled. "How is Ryan doing, by the way?" "I heard Harrington & Sons lost the Riverside Manufacturing contract. That's got to hurt." Dad clenched his jaw. "We're fine." "Are you? Because from what I hear, you've lost about $2 million in annual revenue over the last 8 months, which must be putting some strain on cash flow." The truth was, I knew exactly how Harrington & Sons was doing financially. Construction is a small sector in our area, so word spreads. Dad was struggling to meet payroll, had laid off 6 employees, and was behind on payments to numerous suppliers. "You planned this," Dad continued, his voice softer now. "This whole thing, you plan to destroy my company." "I plan to build a better company," I countered. "If that happens to put pressure on Harrington & Sons, well, that's the free market at work." Dad sank on the chair opposite from my desk. For the first time since walking in, he appeared defeated rather than enraged. "Why?" he inquired. "I gave you a job, taught you the business, treated you like family." "Treated me like family?" I cracked up. "Dad, you told me I wasn't man enough to run the business. You gave everything to Ryan without even considering what I'd contributed. You made it clear that in your eyes, I'd never be anything more than a support guy." "I was trying to be realistic about your strengths and weaknesses." "No," I answered, standing up and strolling around my desk. "You were playing favorites, just like you always did. Ryan was the golden boy who could do no wrong, and I was the disappointing son who didn't measure up to your idea of what a man should be." I motioned around my workplace. "Well, this is what your not man enough son built. Pinnacle Construction Solutions did $12 million in revenue last year. We're on track for $18 million this year. We employ 28 people, and every single one of them makes more money than they would at Harrington & Sons." Dad glanced at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. "How?" he inquired. "By doing everything you said couldn't be done. By using technology instead of fighting it. By providing clients with transparency instead of asking them to trust us blindly. By treating our employees like professionals instead of treating them like laborers who should be grateful for whatever we give them." I reclined my chair. "You know what the funny thing is, Dad? I learned all of this working for you. Every mistake Harrington & Sons made, every inefficiency, every client complaint. I was paying attention. I was learning what not to do." Dad was silent for a while, then he asked, "What do you want?" "I want you to admit you were wrong." I want you to acknowledge that I was man enough to run the family business, and that your precious golden boy Ryan isn't. Mark, how is Ryan doing as president, by the way? Is he commanding all that respect you were so worried about? Dad's lack of response told me everything I needed to know. Let me guess, I added. Half the crew thinks he's an idiot. The other half doesn't respect him because they know he only got the job because he's your son. Suppliers don't trust him to make decisions because he doesn't understand the numbers. Clients are frustrated because he overpromises and underdelivers. It's been an adjustment period, Dad remarked softly. An adjustment period, Dad? It's been 2 years. If Ryan was going to figure it out, he would have by now. I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. Want to see something interesting? This is a financial analysis I had my accountant run, comparing Harrington and Sons' performance over the past 2 years versus the 2 years before that. The spreadsheet displayed everything. Revenue fell 35%. Profit margins dropped from 12% to 3%. Client retention rate decreased from 85% to 60%. The average project completion time increased by 20%. These aren't just bad numbers, Dad, they're catastrophic. Ryan isn't just failing to grow the business. He's actively destroying it. Dad gazed at the screen, as if it were displaying his death certificate. Meanwhile, I said, opening a different spreadsheet, Pinnacle's numbers look like this. Revenue growth of 400% year-over-year. Profit margins of 18%. Client retention rate of 95%. Average project completion time 15% faster than industry standard. I'm not just man enough to run a construction business, Dad, I'm better at it than you ever were. That broke him. Dad buried his head in his hands and began crying. I had never seen him cry before, even when his own father died. I'm sorry, he muttered. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about everything. I felt a mixture of joy and sadness as I watched him break down. This was what I was looking for. Acknowledgement, vindication, and proof that I had been correct all along. But watching my father cry in my workplace didn't feel as fantastic as I expected. It's too late for apologies, Dad. The damage has been done. He glanced up at me, tears still in his eyes. What can I do? How can I fix this? You can't. Harrington and Sons is finished. Even if you fired Ryan tomorrow and begged your old clients to come back, they're not going to trust you again. You had your chance to do things right, and you chose favoritism over competence. Father wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. What's going to happen to the company? To Ryan? I honestly don't care what happens to Ryan. He made his bed when he went along with your plan to push me out. As for the company, I imagine you'll have to sell whatever assets you can and pay off your debts. If you're lucky, you might avoid personal bankruptcy. And then what? I'm 62 years old, Mark, and this is all I know. I briefly contemplated hiring him. Despite being a lousy businessman, he was nevertheless a decent construction supervisor. But then I remembered all the years I'd been told I wasn't man enough. All the adulation bestowed on Ryan while my accomplishments were ignored. All the hurt and fury that had brought me here. I guess you'll figure it out, I told you. You're a smart guy. You'll adapt. Dad rose up slowly as if everything hurt. I guess I deserve this. You do, I replied. But for what it's worth, I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it to show you wrong. He nodded and proceeded toward the door. He then came to a halt and reversed his direction. For what it's worth, son. I'm proud of what you've built here. I should have seen it sooner. Yeah, was my response. You should have. After he departed, I sat in my office for a long time, reflecting on all that had occurred. I'd gained everything I wanted, confirmation that I was better than Ryan, Dad's admission that he was wrong, and the satisfaction of watching Harrington and Sons fail. But I also felt empty, as if I'd won a fight that no longer matters. That happened 3 months ago. Harrington and Sons filed for bankruptcy last month. Dad had to liquidate the company's assets to repay creditors. Ryan is now working for one of our competitors, earning approximately half of what he used to, and most likely receiving the respect he deserves. Dad occasionally calls me to see if there is any employment available at Pinnacle. I have not hired him yet, but I am thinking about it. He's a good supervisor when he's not attempting to choose favorites, and we're growing quickly enough to require experienced employees. The irony is that Ryan contacted me last week, the first time we'd spoken since I quit Harrington and Sons. Mark, he commented, I want to apologize. I should have stood up for you with Dad. I knew you were better at the business side than me, but I was selfish and let him play favorites. Little late for that, don't you think? Yeah, probably. But I wanted you to know that you were right. I wasn't ready to run that company. I'm not sure I'll ever be ready to run a company. So what are you going to do now? I don't know. Maybe go back to school, try to learn some of the stuff you tried to teach me. Maybe see if you'd be willing to hire me at Pinnacle. I was chuckling. You want to work for me? I want to learn how to do things right, and you're the only person I know who actually knows how to run a construction business. I have not determined what to tell him yet. Part of me believes it would be satisfying to have my golden boy brother working for me and possibly learning some humility. But a part of me believes it is best to leave the past behind. Right now my primary focus is on growing Pinnacle Construction Solutions. We'll be bidding on a $15 million hospital rehabilitation project next month, the kind of job that Harrington and Sons would never have been qualified for, and the type of challenge that makes me want to get out of bed in the morning. Mom still invites me to family meals. However, the situation has changed dramatically. Instead of discussing Ryan's latest accomplishments, everyone asks me about my firm, my expansion plans, and my thoughts into the construction sector. It feels strange to be the successful son after being the disappointment for so long, but I'll take it. The funniest aspect is that Dad's colleagues and business acquaintances suddenly refer to me as the one who truly understands construction, as if they had always known I was the smart one rather than the guy who was not masculine enough to operate a construction company. I suppose the moral of the story is that sometimes you have to burn everything down to prove that you were correct all along. It isn't the most mature approach, but it certainly is pleasant. Update. Dad began working for me as a project supervisor 3 weeks ago. He called me aside on the first day of work and said, "I want you to know that you're the boss here, no special treatment because I'm your father. If I screw up, fire me." So far he's been fantastic. When he's not attempting to pick favorites with his boys, he's actually a good manager. Who knew? Ryan is still considering if he wants to work with Pinnacle. I advised him that if he was serious, he should start at the bottom, general laborer. Perhaps he can work his way up to crew chief if he proves himself. No shortcuts this time. We'll see if he has the courage to swallow his pride and do the work.